what's up guys, welcome back to our channel. Today we are gonna see what is Naruto story. So please like the video and share with your friend and subscribe the channel. Let's start the story.
Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Had Secret Harem with Freren and Had Ancient Mage So Do 4 Blue Hearts Comment, BS. You're to subscribe to our channel and like this video and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Naruto X Rias uncensored spicy version, link in description. The clearing was a quiet sanctuary, framed by tall, ancient trees that seemed to lean inward, their branches forming a natural canopy. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the soft earth with golden patches. Freren knelt at the center of the clearing, her pale hair glinting faintly in the light as she carefully traced an intricate summoning circle into the ground. Despite her age and vast experience, her movements were oddly clumsy. The stick she wielded occasionally slipped in her hand, causing lines to wobble. Yet, the runes she etched were precise, glowing faintly with latent magic even before she activated them. Stark stood several paces away, arms crossed and an expression of cautious skepticism etched into his face. He watched her work with the wariness of a man who had seen too many plans go awry. "I still think this is a bad idea," he said, breaking the silence. "You're messing with summoning magic, and you don't even know what, or who, you're going to bring here." Freren didn't look up. Her voice was calm, detached. "It's a calculated risk." "A calculated risk," Stark repeated, shaking his head. "Right. That's what people say before they blow themselves up." Freren stood closer to Freren, her posture straight and her expression filled with unshakable faith. "If Mistress Freren believes it's worth the risk, then it is. She wouldn't attempt this without a good reason." "She doesn't always explain her reasons," Stark muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's what worries me." Freren finished the last rune with a slightly uneven stroke, then set the stick aside. She leaned back on her heels, examining the diagram with a critical eye. Despite its imperfections, the summoning circle pulsed faintly with power, as if alive. Satisfied, she reached out and placed her hands on the outer edge of the circle. A soft hum filled the clearing as she began to channel her mana into the runes. The glow intensified, spreading outward in rippling waves. The runes lit up one by one, their light merging into a radiant golden hue. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, and the air grew warm and heavy with magic. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light dimmed, and the clearing fell silent. Stark lowered his arms, which he'd instinctively raised to shield his face. "That's it?" he asked, his tone equal parts relief and confusion. "Nothing happened, I guess." "It didn't fail," Freren interrupted, her eyes fixed on the circle. She adjusted her robes, her voice filled with certainty. "It's working." Freren remained silent, her gaze unwavering. Before Stark could retort, the circle flared to life once more, this time with a blinding burst of golden light. The brilliance was so intense it seemed to fill every corner of the clearing, forcing Stark to step back and squint against the glow. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, followed by a sharp, unexpected sound, a scream. Stark's instincts kicked in. His hand went to his weapon, and he leapt forward, positioning himself between the women and whatever had emerged. As the light faded, he tightened his grip, expecting a monster or some otherworldly abomination. But it wasn't a monster. "It's a boy," Stark said, his voice filled with confusion. Lying at the heart of the summoning circle was a young boy, no older than 12 or 13. His hair was short and messy, a striking shade of crimson that glinted like embers in the dimming light. His pale skin seemed untouched by the sun, and his clothes, far from being tattered, were pristine and unfamiliar. He wore a strange white robe that shimmered faintly, and over it was a cloak that looked oddly familiar. Freren stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate. She knelt beside the boy, her sharp eyes scanning him with the precision of someone who had seen far too much in her long life. Carefully, she reached out and opened one of his eyes, tilting his head slightly to catch the light. His gaze was unfocused. His iris is a soft golden hue that seemed to flicker faintly, like a candle's flame. "Mistress Freren?" Freren asked, taking a cautious step closer. "What is it? Is he human?" "He's human," Freren murmured, her voice calm but tinged with something almost imperceptible. "Probably 13, but he has." She paused, her fingers brushing against the edge of the cloak he wore. Her eyes narrowed. "What?" Stark asked, stepping closer but keeping his distance from the circle. "He has what?" Freren rose slowly, brushing her hands against her cloak as if to dispel some unseen weight. She glanced at the boy's cloak once more, then at Stark and Freren. "He has the same mana as her." Fren's eyes widened. "Her? Do you mean?" "Yes," Freren said, her tone clipped. "Flom." Stark froze. The name cutting through the tension like a blade. Flom, as in the greatest mage in history. That Flom. Freyrin nodded once, her expression unreadable. The mana is unmistakable. And the cloak. Her voice trailed off, but she didn't need to finish the thought. Stark and friend followed her gaze, their eyes settling on the boy's cloak. It was elegant yet simple, its design strikingly similar to the one depicted in countless illustrations of the legendary mage. Friend gasped softly, her hands covering her mouth. But how? Flom has been gone for centuries. This boy, could he be her descendant? Or something else entirely? Freyrin said, her eyes narrowing as she turned her gaze back to the boy. We'll know more when he wakes. Oh. Naruto's senses felt dulled as he floated in the void, a stark, endless expanse of whiteness that neither comforted nor alarmed him. It was neither warm nor cold, neither soft nor hard, it was simply nothing. His memories were fragmented, bits of battle ND pain coming back to him like shards of glass pricking his consciousness. Akatsuki. They had captured him. They had drained the Kyuubi. He could still feel the phantom ache where the immense power of the beast once surged through him. Was this death? He tried to speak, to scream, but his voice didn't carry. The emptiness swallowed all sound. Then, out of the void, a figure appeared, a woman with striking red hair cascading like fire and piercing green eyes that glowed with intensity. Her presence seemed to bring color to the lifeless space. She was radiant, commanding, and familiar in a way that made his chest ache. Before he could question her identity, she leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on his forehead. Carry my legacy, she said, her voice both tender and commanding. Do not falter. And just like that, she was gone. The whiteness shattered, and Naruto jolted awake. His body felt heavy as he sat up, his breath coming in short gasps. His senses reeled, the unfamiliar scene. Tea of polished wood and the earthy smell of herbs filled his nose. He blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light of a room. He wasn't in Konoha, nor in any place he recognized. The room was simple yet well kept, with wooden furniture. A single window letting in soft sunlight, and a sense of warmth that was distinctly foreign. Naruto's first thought was of his friends. Had Granny Tsunade saved him? Maybe Pervy Sage had swooped in at the last second. Or Kakashi-sensei, he was clever like that. But as his eyes scanned the room, his confusion only deepened. A boy sat cross-legged beside his bed, saws. Ali polishing a massive axe that seemed almost too big for him to wield. He had red hair, not unlike the woman in the void, but his eyes were different kind of brighter, like a kind man. A jagged scar ran across his forehead, giving him an air of ruggedness despite his youthful appearance. You're awake, the boy said, his tone matter of fact but not unkind. Yeah, Naruto replied, his voice raspy. He coughed and rubbed his throat. Where am I? Did someone save me? The boy tilted his head, setting the axe down beside him. You tell me. Who are you? Naruto frowned. Naruto Uzumaki. And you? Stark, the boy replied. He smirked. Odd name you got there. Hey, yours is pretty weird too, you know. Naruto shot back, his indignation momentarily outweighing his confusion. Stark laughed, a surprisingly hearty sound. Fair enough. Where are you from, Uzumaki? Konoha, Naruto said automatically, then paused. Wait, where am I? And what do you mean where am I from? Konoha, Stark leaned back, his hands resting behind his head. So you really are from a different world, huh? Naruto's jaw dropped. What? Before Stark could elaborate, the door creaked open. A girl, probably a few years older than Naruto, stepped in. She had purple hair tied neatly back and a stoic expression that reminded him of Shino, minus the sunglasses. She carried herself with an air of efficiency, her movements precise and deliberate. You're awake, she said, her voice calm but firm. Good. Mistress, he's awake. Naruto blinked. Mistress. The girl didn't answer, instead stepping aside to allow another figure to enter. The woman who stepped through the door was unlike anyone Naruto had ever seen. Her super pale blonde hair shimmered in the light, and her eyes were sharp, calculating, and inscient in a way that defied her youthful appearance. But what caught Naruto's attention the most were her ears, long and pointed, almost like the elves in the storybooks Iruka-sensei had once read to the class. The girl with purple hair gestured toward the woman. This is Mistress Freyrin, the elf mage. Naruto gawked at the woman, unable to hide his amazement. Whoa, your ears are so pointy. Are you like a fairy or something? Freyrin didn't respond. She approached him slowly, her gaze scrutinizing, as if she were peeling back layers of his soul. Without a word, she knelt beside the bed and tilted his chin up. Her fingers cool and firm as she examined his face. Her sharp eyes locked onto his as she muttered, almost to herself, are you Flom? Naruto blinked. What? No, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Believe it. Freren's expression didn't change. She studied him for a moment longer, her eyes narrowing slightly before she stood and turned away. Without a word, she left the room, her footsteps soft but deliberate. Huh. Naruto watched her go, thoroughly baffled. What's her problem? The purple-haired girl, Fren, apparently, cleared her throat. Mistress Freren is rarely wrong. If she's interested in you, there's a reason. Stark chuckled from his spot by the window. Don't take it personally. She's like that with everyone. Naruto crossed his arms, his frustration mounting. Yeah, well, I still don't get what's going on. Who's Flom? And what's this about me being from another world? Fren hesitated, glancing at Stark. He shrugged. Might as well tell him. Not like he's going anywhere. Fren sighed. Flom was a legendary mage, a prodigy who shaped the magical world as we know it. Mistress Freren was her apprentice. If Mistress Freren thinks you're connected to her, it's no small matter. Naruto scratched the back of his head, feeling more lost than ever. But I don't know any Flom. I'm just me. And what's with that summoning thing Stark was talking about? Fren and Stark exchanged a look. You're not from here, Fren said finally. That much is obvious. Mistress Freren used a summoning spell to call forth a magical prodigy. You appeared. Naruto's eyes widened. Wait, you're saying she summoned me? Like, poof, out of nowhere. Like a summoning contract. Something like that, Stark said, grinning. Guess you're the magical prodigy. Naruto stared at them, his mind racing. He thought of the red-haired woman in the void, her words echoing in his ears. Carry my legacy. What did that mean? Why him? And what was he supposed to do now? Naruto blinked, the weight of his reality sinking in. He was far from home, in a strange world with strange people, and, as far as he could tell, there was no way back. He stared at the ceiling, the gravity of his situation pressing on his chest like a physical weight. His friends, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei, even that annoying Sasuke, were all gone. Granny Tsunade, who always scolded him yet believed in him, and Pervy Sage, who taught him more than just ninjutsu. They were gone too. His dream, the one that defined him, the one he had clung to since he was a kid, to be the greatest shinobi, to be the Hokage, was suddenly unreachable. Was it all gone? Did he actually die back there when the Akatsuki drained him of the Kyuubi? His eyes darted around the room until they landed on a small mirror propped up on the bedside table. Reluctantly, he turned to look, his heart pounding with trepidation. The face staring back at him was wrong. His blonde hair was gone, replaced by a wild mess of fiery red strands that reminded him of that woman from his dream. His sky-blue eyes were no longer his own, instead, they were a vibrant jade green, reminiscent of Sakura's but deeper, more intricate, like the leaves of an ancient forest. His whisker birthmarks were gone too, and his skin. It was pale, almost translucent, like he'd never spent a day under the sun. His breathing quickened as his hands shot up to touch his face. The coolness of his skin confirming what he saw. Who is this? He thought in a frenzy. Was this him? Was he even Naruto Uzumaki anymore? Panic bubbled in his chest like a storm. His thoughts raced, each one sharper and more painful than the last. If he wasn't Naruto, then who was he? Stark noticed immediately. Hey, Uzumaki, you alright? The red-haired boy asked, his brows knitting in concern. Naruto didn't respond, his breaths coming in shallow, rapid gasps. Stark stood, approaching cautiously. Hey, man, calm down. It's okay. Naruto's hands clenched the bed sheets as he tried to ground himself. But the fear was overwhelming. I can't breathe, he gasped, his voice breaking. Stark reached out, placing a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Relax, okay. Just take deep breaths. In and out, come on. But Naruto couldn't hear him. The room seemed to close in around him, the air growing thicker with every second. His chest heaved as his vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges. Mr. Stark, move. Fren's calm voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She had entered the room unnoticed, her purple hair catching the light as she stepped closer. She raised a hand, and a soft glow emanated from her palm. Mr. Naruto, she said firmly, her voice steady and soothing, you're safe. Sleep now. Naruto's panic began to ebb as the light enveloped him, his breathing slowing until it steadied. His eyelids grew heavy, and within moments, he was unconscious, his body finally at rest. Fren let out a soft sigh of relief, lowering her hand as the glow faded. He was hyperventilating, she explained. Glancing at Stark, who still looked unsettled. He's overwhelmed. He cannot accept he is not in his world anymore. Stark rubbed the back of his neck, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by unease. I tried to help, but he wasn't listening. I don't think he even saw me. Fren nodded, her expression softening as she looked at the boy now peacefully asleep. He's just a kid, she said quietly. A scared, lost kid in a place he doesn't understand. Stark crossed his arms, his gaze lingering on Naruto. What's Frieren going to do with him? She isn't the type to babysit. Friend didn't answer immediately. Instead, she adjusted the blanket over Naruto, her movements careful and deliberate. I don't know, she admitted. But if Mistress Frieren believes he's connected to Flom, then he's more important than we can imagine. The room fell into silence, save for the sound of Naruto's steady breathing. Both Friend and Stark knew one thing for certain. This boy, whoever, or whatever, he was, had already changed everything. Oh. The night was quiet, the only sounds coming from the occasional rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. Frieren sat perched on the rooftop of the small church they had made their temporary base, her pointed ears barely visible under the hood of her cloak. In her hands was an old, worn book, its pages illuminated by the soft moonlight. She pegged through it with the kind of patience only someone like her, who had lived for centuries, could possess. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Friend climbing up to join her. The younger mage settled beside her, brushing her purple hair back and exhaling softly. He was having a panic attack, Friend said after a moment. Her voice was steady, though tinged with concern. I put him to sleep with a spell. Frieren didn't respond, her eyes still on the pages of her book. Curiosity got the better of Friend. Mistress Frieren, what are you reading? Flom's notes, Frieren replied simply, turning another page. The one's Aizen helped us recover. Friend's eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh. Does it say anything about this boy, Mr. Naruto? No, Frieren replied, her voice as neutral as ever, though there was a faint shadow of thoughtfulness in her expression. Friend hesitated before pressing further. Mistress, why do you think he's connected to her? But Mr. Stark has red hair too, and his eyes, Frieren cut in, her tone leaving no room for doubt. They were like hers. And his mana, it was exactly like hers. Even the robes he wore, they matched Flom's. Friend furrowed her brows, trying to piece together the puzzle. Do you think he could be her descendant? Frieren shook her head slightly, closing the book with a soft thud. No, he's an outworlder, not from this plane. Oh, Friend said, pausing as if unsure whether to accept that answer. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe, Frieren replied, though the doubt in her voice was subtle but present. Friend thought about it for a moment longer, then said. But his mana, it felt so vast. Untamed. Frieren glanced at her, a flicker of amusement in her otherwise stoic gaze. It's only natural for someone who's never had mana before. Huh. Friend blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? Nothing, Frieren replied, looking back toward the stars. Her words were cryptic, as they often were, and Friend couldn't tell if her mistress was teasing or genuinely avoiding the question. Friend shifted uncomfortably, trying to reconcile the mysteries swirling around Naruto. Well, he's not suppressing his mana like we do, right? So it just feels larger. But it's not like yours. It's just way more than mine. Frieren's gaze remained fixed on the night sky. Who said he wasn't suppressing it? The question landed like a weight in Friend's chest. She stared at Frieren in shock. Huh, what do you mean by that? Frieren didn't answer immediately, her expression unreadable as always. Finally, she said, nothing. You'll see soon. Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves and the faint chirping of crickets. The two women sat together, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken thoughts. After a while, Friend spoke up again. Mistress, if he really is a prodigy of magic, will you take him as your apprentice? Frieren tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. Oh, yeah. Friend looked away, her hands fiddling with the hem of her cloak. I see. Frieren glanced at her, catching the subtle shift in her demeanor. Is something wrong? Friend shook her head quickly, forcing a small smile. No, nothing. I was just wondering. Frieren didn't press further, though her perceptive gaze lingered on Friend for a moment longer before returning to the horizon. The stars shone brightly overhead, their light pale compared to the weight of the questions surrounding the boy asleep in the church below. Naruto woke up in the unfamiliar room, the events of earlier still fresh in his mind, but this time, he felt calmer. The scent of food filled the air, and his stomach growled. His eyes darted around until they landed on Stark, who sat casually nearby, his massive axe leaning against the wall. Yo, you're awake again. Stark greeted with a small wave. Hungry. Naruto grinned, his usual energy returning. Starving. Stark handed him a plate, and Naruto tore into the food with gusto, grinning between bites. Man, this is great. You're not half bad, Stark. Stark chuckled. Glad you like it. So, what do you think of this place? Naruto glanced around. Well, it's cozy, but where am I, exactly? Before Stark could answer, Naruto's gaze fixed on the giant axe beside him. Whoa, what's with that huge axe? It looks awesome. Oh, this. Stark patted it proudly. It's a gift from my master, recent. A warrior's weapon. Naruto nodded, his excitement palpable. That's so cool, you know. Your master must have been amazing. Stark smiled. He was. What about you? You look like a fighter too. Pretty much. Naruto said between bites. Been training since I was a kid. That's awesome. Maybe we could spar sometime, Stark offered, clearly intrigued. Totally. Naruto agreed. Enthusiastically before his expression darkened. But, how am I still alive? The last thing I remember. I was killed. Stark's eyes widened. Killed? By who? Naruto's face hardened. A group called the Akatsuki. They wanted the power inside me, Kyuubi's power. Stark tilted his head, confused. Kyuubi? What's that? Naruto sighed. It's complicated. A power they thought would help them rule the world. Or something like that. Before Stark could ask more, the door opened, and Friend stepped in with Frieren following behind her. Friend gave Naruto a kind smile. Good to see you up and about. Naruto nodded. Yeah, thanks. But seriously, how did I end up here? Frieren, standing silently by the door, spoke flatly. I was attempting to summon a prodigious mage. It seems I summoned you instead. Naruto blinked, then scowled. Pointing at her. Oh, Stark did tell me that. It was you. You're the one who dragged me into this mess. Friend stepped forward, hands raised. Mr. Naruto, please don't speak to Mistress Frieren like that. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Mistress, you look older than this pointy-eared gal. What is she, some kind of noble? Friend frowned slightly. She's my mentor. Wait, she's your mentor. Naruto looked Frieren up and down. But she looks younger than you. She's actually over 1,000 years old, Friend said matter-of-factly. Naruto froze, his jaw dropping. Then, as if a switch flipped, he burst into laughter. Over 1,000 years old. So she's like Granny Tsunade, but 500 times worse. Frieren's eyes narrowed slightly. Disrespectful brat. What did you say, hag? Don't call me that, brat. Naruto smirked, cupping a hand to his ear. Can't hear you, Hag. Frieren sighed, her tone icy. You're hopeless. And you're an old hag. Naruto shot back with a triumphant grin. Stark struggled to keep a straight face while Friend looked torn between exasperation and amusement. Frieren, as stoic as ever, turned on her heel and left the room without another word. Hey, where are you going? Naruto called after her. Probably to get away from you, Stark muttered with a chuckle. Naruto huffed, crossing his arms. She started it. Then, despite his frustration, he found himself smiling. For the first time since waking up in this strange world, things felt almost normal. The next morning, Naruto emerged from his room wearing an unfamiliar but striking set of robes. They were soft to the touch, made of a material unlike anything he'd encountered before. The deep gold and white tones shimmered faintly in the light, giving them an almost ethereal quality. Stark had explained that these robes were what Naruto had arrived in, preserved in immaculate condition through some ancient magical enchantment. Naruto adjusted the fit awkwardly. Man, this stuff is fancy. Not really my style. It suits you, Stark said with a shrug. Besides, it's not like we have a wardrobe full of warrior outfits lying around. Naruto sighed, glancing at the strange reflections in the polished glass of the church window. His jade-like eyes, so foreign compared to his original blue, and his pale skin stared back at him, unfamiliar and unsettling. Throughout the day, his thoughts swirled like an untamed storm. Magic, this force beyond comprehension, had not only yanked him from the brink of death but also hurled him into a world he didn't understand. Friends. Words echoed in his mind. There was no known way to reverse the summoning spell. Even Frieren, with her 1,000 years of experience, couldn't provide a solution. His heart ached for the home he might never see again. The bustling streets of Konoha, Haruka's warm smiles, Kakashi's lazy but watchful eyes, Jiraiya's wild antics, and Sakura's sharp but caring reprimands. His dream to become the Hokage and bring Sasuke home, was all of it really gone? The following morning, during breakfast, Naruto finally spoke his mind. The clatter of utensils paused as he stood abruptly, a determined fire blazing in his now unfamiliar eyes. I've decided, he said, his voice steady. I'm going to learn magic. I'll figure out a spell that'll get me back to Konoha. The room fell silent. Stark stopped chewing, and Friend set down her fork. And what if no such spell exists? Friend asked cautiously. What will you do then, Mr. Naruto? That does make things a lot more difficult. Naruto hesitated but only for a moment. He clenched his fists. his resolve unshaken. If it exists, I'll find it, if it doesn't, then I'll make it. Farron, who had been quietly sipping her tea, looked up sharply. She studied the as if searching for something in his expression. For a fleeting moment, she was reminded of Flom, the prodigy mage who had once uttered something equally audacious. You really think you can do that? She asked at last, her tone unreadable. Naruto met her gaze with unwavering confidence. I don't think, I know I can. Farron stood, folding her napkin with deliberate care. Then, Naruto, would you like to learn magic from me? Naruto blinked, momentarily caught off guard. From you, the hag. Friend's exasperation was immediate. Mr. Naruto, Mistress Farron might be socially awkward, slow, and late to everything, she said, making Farron's eye twitch. But she's an incredible mage, the only apprentice of the legendary mage Flom and a remarkable teacher. Both Mr. Hyder and Mr. Ison said so. Naruto tilted his head, his lips quirking into a grin. Well, I guess I could give her a shot. After all, it's kinda her fault I'm stuck here anyway. Farron ignored the jab, nodding with a calm that was almost infuriating. Then it's settled. Naruto Uzumaki, you are now my official second apprentice and the fourth member of our party. Stark groaned, dramatically throwing his hands into the air. Another mage. Great. Now I'm outnumbered by magic nerds. Naruto puffed out his chest. Hey, I can fight too, you know. Stark leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Oh yeah, think you can beat me, kid? Naruto's grin widened, his cockiness returning in full force. Bring it on, big guy. Friend sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose as the two continued to bicker. Farron, however, resumed her breakfast with her usual detached expression, though a faint smile tugged at her lips. This boy, she mused, was reckless and brash, but perhaps he was just what the party needed. As they began their journey, the group ventured through dense forests and over rugged mountains for hours before finally setting up camp for the night. While the others rested, Naruto buzzed with excitement and immediately pestered Farron to teach him some awesome magic. Farron, lounging near the fire, was less than enthusiastic. Not now, she muttered, half asleep, her usual lethargy on full display. Naruto, however, refused to back down. Come on, hag, just one cool spell. You're my teacher now, right? Teach me something. Reluctantly, Farron opened one eye and sighed. Fine, start by suppressing your mana. Shrink it to about 1/20th of its normal size. Mana. Naruto tilted his head, confused. Seeing no way around it, Farron sat up and began explaining. Mana is the source of magic. It's the energy within you, tied to your spirit and will. You'll need to control it to cast even basic spells. Her explanation quickly devolved into abstract terms about the flow of mana, inner resonance, and the essence of magic. Most of it soared over Naruto's head. He scratched the back of his neck, frowning. So, it's like chakra. Farron blinked, not understanding the term, but didn't press him. If that's how you see it, sure, just focus on suppressing it for now. Naruto crossed his arms. But that sounds boring. Can't you just teach me a flashy move instead? Focus, Farron said sharply, pointing to the campfire. No magic until you can control your mana. Naruto huffed but closed his eyes, trying to concentrate. The effort was short-lived. His frustration boiled over in minutes as he groaned. How do you even find mana? It's not like I've got a map for it. Stark, sharpening his axe nearby, chuckled. First day and he's already complaining. I like this kid. Fern, ever supportive, tried to encourage him. Mr. Naruto, try to feel the energy in your body, like how you'd sense heat or tension. It's there, you just need to listen to it. Naruto gave her an optimistic thumbs up. Right, feel the energy. Got it. He tried again but failed spectacularly, causing an unexpected spark that nearly singed his own hair. Farron shook her head. Hopeless, she muttered. But as Naruto grumbled and vowed to try again, there was a flicker of determination in his jade-like eyes. Even Farron noticed. Well, she thought to herself, at least he's not giving up. As the campfire crackled softly, Naruto stared at his reflection in a small pool of water nearby, his jade-green eyes glinting in the firelight. The unfamiliar sight of his red hair, pale skin, and the absence of his whisker marks still unnerved him. Finally, unable to hold back his confusion, he turned to Farron, who was half lying against a log, flipping lazily through a weathered tome. Oi, hag, he called, his tone laced with irritation. Why do I look like this? My whole body's colors changed. My hair, my eyes, my skin, everything's different. Plus, last time I checked, I wasn't this short. Eren didn't even glance up from her book. I don't know, she replied flatly. Naruto gawked at her. What do you mean you don't know. You're the one who summoned me here. And, Freren finally looked at him. Her expression as blank as ever. That doesn't mean I know why your appearance changed. Naruto threw his hands up. You're supposed to be this great mage, right? Shouldn't you have answers for this kind of thing? Being a great mage doesn't make me omniscient, she said, returning her gaze to her book. That's just a fancy word for lazy, isn't it? Naruto grumbled under his breath before slumping back against a tree. Stark, who was polishing his axe nearby, laughed. Better get used to it, kid. Freren's answers are always about as clear as mud. Fern shot Stark a disapproving look. Mistress Freren's knowledge is unparalleled. If she doesn't know, it's because the phenomenon itself is unprecedented. Naruto frowned, crossing his arms. What now? Unprecedented, Fern repeated. It means it's never happened before. Naruto groaned, dragging his hands down his face. Great. So I'm a freak accident now. Just my luck. Not necessarily, Freren said suddenly, her tone thoughtful. Changes like this could be a side effect of the summoning. Or perhaps. Naruto perked up. Perhaps what? Freren paused, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. Perhaps it's tied to the nature of your mana. I'll need to observe you more to say for sure. Well, that's better than nothing, I guess, Naruto muttered. Then, with a sigh, he leaned back against the tree trunk, gazing at the starry sky above. But you better figure it out soon, hag. I need to get back home looking like me, not some weird childish tomato version of myself. Oh. The group arrived at a busy town as the sun began its descent. The towering gates were guarded by soldiers, one of whom stepped forward, blocking their path. Passes? The guard asked, his hand extended. Stark groaned, patting his pockets. Do we look like we carry passes? We're just travelers. That's what traveling means. You carry a pass. We don't have one, Fern said. The guard's stern expression didn't waver. No pass, no entry. Freren, without a word, pulled out an ornate seal from her pouch and held it up. The guard's eyes widened before he quickly stepped aside. Apologies, esteemed mage. You may enter. Naruto blinked, leaning toward Stark. What was that all about? Being over 1,000 years old has its perks, I guess, Stark muttered. Inside the town, the streets buzzed with life, vendors shouting, children laughing. And the enticing aroma of food wafting through the air. Naruto's stomach growled audibly. Man, I'm starving, Naruto whined, eyeing a stall selling skewered meat. Join the club, Stark said, rubbing his own stomach. I'll handle the food situation, Fern volunteered. But Mistress Freren, didn't you say you needed something? Grimoires, Freren said curtly, her eyes scanning the street for a bookstore. And I need to restock our supplies, Fern added, pointing to a general store nearby. Naruto's eyes sparkled. Does that mean I get to explore? Don't cause trouble, Freren said, her voice carrying an edge of warning. I never cause trouble, Naruto protested, puffing his chest. You're trouble incarnate, Stark teased, earning a glare from the boy. With that, the group split up, Freren heading toward an ancient-looking bookstore, Fern disappearing into the general store, and Naruto dragging Stark toward the food stalls. Naruto's eyes darted between skewers, buns, and pastries. I don't know where to start. Everything looks so good, Stark chuckled, handing the vendor some coins. Start with this. He tossed Naruto a steaming skewer. Naruto took a bite and his face lit up. This is amazing, Stark grinned, biting into his own. Told ya. Now, let's see if we can grab a few more before Fern finds us and makes us carry supplies. A few hours later, Naruto wandered the crowded street. Hands tucked behind his head, groaning at his luck. Stark had ditched him to buy polish for his axe, and now he was left alone in this unfamiliar town. Stark had been good company, cracking jokes and keeping the atmosphere light, but now Naruto felt aimless. There were signs hanging with various letters, weird alphabets he couldn't understand. However, since a spell was casted on him by the great mage, he could understand what these stuff said. As he strolled, his jade eyes caught an accessory shop with a sign that read, Rare Treasures of the Unknown. Intrigued, he whistled, stepping closer to inspect the bizarre collection on display. The shop was a chaotic mess of oddities, skull-shaped trinkets, glowing stones, dusty amulets, and jars containing unidentifiable liquids. One item caught his eye, a small, intricately designed dagger with a shimmering blue gem in its hilt. Admiring fine craftsmanship, are we? The shopkeeper asked, his voice oily yet inviting. Naruto grinned, picking up the dagger. And trying out various simple moves. This is pretty cool. How much? Ah, for you, young traveler, a mere coin, the salesman said, his grin stretching unnaturally wide. Naruto's eyes lit up. He fumbled for his single coin, weighing it in his palm. This was the only money the hag had given him. Fern had strictly told him not to waste it. But this dagger looked so cool. A deal like that, sweet. Just as he was about to hand it over, Farron appeared behind him like a shadow. Her voice cut through the air, calm yet cold. It's fake. Naruto froze, blinking. What? The shopkeeper's grin faltered. Madam, that's a baseless accusation. I assure you, this dagger is a cheap replica, Farron interrupted, tilting her head toward Naruto. The gem isn't magical. The blade won't cut anything tougher than butter, and it's definitely not worth a coin. The salesman sputtered. She's trying to degrade the price. You can't trust. Before he could finish, Farron's icy glare silenced him. I have years of experience with relics. You really want to argue with me? The shopkeeper huffed, waving his hands dismissively. Out. Both of you. You're bad for business. Naruto was practically dragged out of the shop. Once they were outside, he scratched the back of his head, begrudgingly mumbling, "Guess, thanks for stopping me from getting scammed." Farron didn't respond. She was carrying a small jar filled with a purple liquid, and Naruto couldn't help but point at it. What's that, hag? Your hairfall solution. Farron's brow twitched. It's a gift for Stark. His birthday is soon. Naruto raised an eyebrow, leaning closer. And what does it do? She glanced at the jar nonchalantly. It dissolves clothes. Naruto almost choked. What? Himmel said men love it, she replied. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. Naruto's face twisted in disbelief. This Himmel guy was a pervert, right? Farron didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. Oh. Stark leaned against a stone pillar in the bustling square, his arms crossed and eyes scanning the crowd. Fern stood nearby, her hands full of supplies she had meticulously picked out from the marketplace. Her usual calm demeanor was overshadowed by a faint twitch of irritation. They've been gone for too long, she muttered. Stark grunted, adjusting the weight of his axe slung across his back. Yeah, leaving those two unsupervised. Not exactly a great idea. Fern sighed, glancing at the towering clock in the square. Mistress Farron alone is manageable, but with Mr. Naruto. It's like throwing oil on a fire. Stark finished, smirking. You think they've caused trouble already? Knowing them, likely. Just then, the duo in question appeared from a side street, furry. Ren walking at her usual unhurried pace while Naruto gestured wildly, clearly mid-rant. Stark raised an eyebrow as they approached, noting the disgruntled look on Naruto's face. Looks like someone's not happy, Stark teased. Naruto pointed an accusatory finger at Farron. She got us kicked out of a shop. Farron remained unbothered, cradling her jar of purple liquid like a trophy. It was a waste of time. Fern blinked. What happened? Naruto groaned. I was this close to buying a cool dagger, and the hag here said it was fake. Because it was fake, Farron said flatly. Still, Naruto huffed. Stark laughed, patting Naruto on the back. Sounds like she saved your wallet, kid. Be thankful. Naruto crossed his arms, grumbling under his breath. Fern eyed the jar in Farron's hands. Mistress, what's that? A gift for Stark. For his birthday. The warrior froze. What? Naruto snickered. You'll love this one, big guy. It dissolves clothes. Stark's face turned crimson as Fern covered her mouth in shock. Farron remained as stoic as ever. Himmel said men appreciate practical gifts, she added, completely serious. Stark groaned, burying his face in his hands. I'm gonna punch Himmel. Once we reach heaven. Naruto's laughter echoed through the square, cutting through the tension and earning a few curious glances from passers-by. The marketplace buzzed with chatter and laughter. But it all came to a halt as Farron stiffened. Her hand shot out, conjuring her staff in a swift motion. The wooden pole shimmered with ancient energy, a subtle but undeniable hum emanating from its core. Naruto, Stark, and Fern froze, confusion painting their faces. Stark took a step forward, glancing around warily. Mistress. Why are you? Demons, Farron cut him off, her voice quiet yet sharp. I sense them here. Her staff rose, pointing directly at a cluster of well-dressed individuals near a fountain. Among them stood three horned figures in human attire, their sinister aura palpable to her. Mana began swirling around Farron, a visible testament to the immense power she wielded. What the hell's she doing? Naruto whispered harshly, but before anyone could react, the town guards rushed in. Drop your weapon, barked one of the guards as two others tackled Farron to the ground. Her staff clattered onto the cobblestone, and her party stared in stunned silence. Hey, Naruto growled. Get off her, you jerks. But the guards were relentless, pinning Farron down as if she were a dangerous criminal. Before Stark or Fern could intervene, Naruto charged. With a burst of speed and strength that caught everyone off guard, he leapt at the nearest guard, knocking him to the ground with a solid punch. The second guard lunged at him, only to be flipped over Naruto's shoulder with ease. His agility was shocking, his moves precise and instinctive. Naruto. Fern called out, but he was already a blur, weaving between guards and taking them down one by one. However, the commotion drew the attention of the horned figures. The tallest of the group, a man with curling ebony horns and cold, predatory eyes, stepped forward. His gaze locked onto Freren, who remained pinned. Those unyielding eyes full of hatred, he said, his tone smooth but laced with menace. You look at me like I'm some wild animal. Freren's golden eyes narrowed as she replied flatly, you are. The man's expression darkened. His gaze then shifted to Naruto, who was still holding his ground against the guards. And this one, quite the feisty human. A man in an aristocratic suit accompanying the demon stepped forward. Was this your doing? The demon asked the man. As much as I want to kill you, I wouldn't do it in an open street, he replied. He looked at the guards, his voice carrying an air of authority. Guards, take the elf and the boy to the dungeons. Now. Naruto's defiance was immediate. I'm not going anywhere, he shouted, throwing another guard to the ground. But even his strength had its limits. It took 6 guards to finally subdue him, forcing him down with their combined weight. Stark and Fern stood back, their faces lined with concern. Should we help? Stark muttered, gripping the handle of his axe. Fern shook her head after a pause. Mistress Freren is not just anybody. She'll be fine. And the kid, he's impulsive, Fern admitted, her eyes following the struggling Naruto. But he'll hold his own, at least for now. The party could only watch as their companions were dragged away, the demons lingering with ominous smiles. The dim dungeon was cold and damp. The air thick with the musty scent of mildew and stone. Naruto paced back and forth in their cell, his voice echoing off the walls. Why the hell were you attacking them, huh? He demanded, glaring at Freren, who sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning against the wall with her eyes half closed. Demons, she said simply, not even looking up. Demons. They were people. People who can talk, hag. They're not some mindless creatures killing anything that moves. Freren's eyes opened slightly, her golden gaze calm but cold. You don't know that. Naruto stopped pacing and turned to face her fully. Frustration etched across his face. Well, how do you know that? I've seen demons pretending to be humane, Freren replied, her voice even. Just because they can talk doesn't mean they're worth negotiating with. They're animals. They aren't animals, Naruto insisted, his voice softer but no less firm. They're living beings with thoughts, feelings. It doesn't matter, Freren cut him off. You'll learn soon enough. I've lived long enough to know better. I've killed demons who fooled others with their words. They always reveal their true nature. Naruto stared at her, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. He wanted to argue, to shout at her for being so dismissive, but a heavy thought struck him instead. His voice dropped to a near whisper. If I had a demon in me, or if I was a demon, would you have killed me when I first arrived? The question hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. Freren's gaze shifted to him, her expression unreadable. For the first time, she hesitated. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. Naruto turned away, his shoulders stiff as he stared at the iron bars. Yeah, that's what I thought. Freren remained quiet, the stillness of the cell broken only by the distant drip of water. For a moment, the centuries-old mage didn't feel as wise as she often claimed to be. Naruto let out an exasperated "Uff" and plopped onto the ragged excuse of a bed, dust puffing into the air as he crossed his legs. His hands rested on his knees, his expression serious for once as he closed his eyes. Concentrating, he began practicing the art of mana suppression, as Freren had instructed him days ago. Freren, seated in the opposite corner, pretended to ignore him, her green eyes fixed on the stone floor. But in truth, she was watching, discreetly. With the subtlety born of centuries of experience. And what she saw made her uneasy. Naruto's mana signature, which she had grown accustomed to, was gone. Completely erased. It wasn't just suppressed, it was as if it didn't exist at all. Such a feat was unheard of, even among the most disciplined mages. She remembered her own practices, the years it had taken. Her to mask her immense reserves of mana and make her presence indistinguishable from that of an ordinary mage. 5 long, relentless years of meticulous practice. Yet here sat this brash, impulsive boy. Achieving something far beyond masking, he had wiped his presence clean in less than a week. Her lips pressed into a thin line. If Naruto were to suppress his mana any further, it wouldn't just disappear, it would compress. Turning volatile, like a bomb waiting to detonate. The potential danger was staggering. Freren should warn him, she knew. The responsible thing would be to stop him before his reckless experimentation led to disaster. But something held her back. Curiosity. Perhaps, there was something peculiar about Naruto, something she couldn't quite place. Watching him now, his brow furrowed in determination. She felt a strange compulsion to wait, to observe. There was more to him than met the eye, and for now, she decided to let the mystery unfold. He's like a walking anomaly, she thought. Leaning back against the wall. Either he'll become a disaster, or something far more. Freren leaned her head against the cold dungeon wall, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Soon, the FAI.NT murmurs of Naruto's mana practice faded into the recesses of her mind, replaced by a familiar landscape of memories. She was standing in a dense, misty forest, her party beside her. Himmel, with his kind yet determined face, stood at the front, gripping his sword tightly. Aizen and Hyder flanked him, their expressions grim as they stared at the creatures ahead. Demons. These weren't the wild, ravenous beasts that ambushed travelers or raided villages. No, these demons were clothed, armed, and speaking with eloquence. One of them, a young-looking woman with a pair of curved horns, pleaded with Himmel. "We only wish to live," she said, her voice trembling. "Why must you hunt us?" Freren glanced at Himmel. His grip on his sword faltered for a brief moment, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to do this. He never wanted to. But he had to. Demons are demons, Aizen's gruff voice cut through the tension. Monsters are animals capable of speech. That's all they are. The demon woman's expression twisted into something unrecognizable, her pleading tone replaced by an icy sneer. And humans, she spat, are nothing but self-righteous hypocrites. Before Freren could process the change, the woman lunged. Claws elongating and teeth bared. It was a trap, as it always was. Demons could feign humanity with terrifying precision, but at the core, they were predators. Himmel's blade flashed, cutting through the air and striking true. The demon fell, her guise of innocence shattered in her final moments. As the memory faded, Freren stirred in her sleep, her face a mix of sorrow and resignation. The dungeon's dim light illuminated her as she whispered, barely audible, "Demons are demons. They'll always be." It was a truth Himmel had accepted, no matter how much it weighed on him. A truth she carried with her even now, through centuries of solitude and battles fought. The dungeon door creaked open, its groan echoing in the dim cell. Freren's sharp gaze flicked up as a young demon stepped inside. Despite his youthful appearance, his aura betrayed centuries of existence. She recognized him immediately, one of the demons she had tried to obliterate earlier in the city. "So," she said, her voice calm. "Almost bored. You're here to kill me." The demon's lips curled into a grin. "Of course. You're a pest, a relic that needs to be disposed of. Just so you know, I am strong," she warned. "Stronger than me," he smirked. "Stronger than Aura," she replied flatly. "Huh, what a liar." Before she could respond, shimmering threads shot from his fingers, wrapping tightly around her neck and throat. With a sharp motion, he lifted her off the ground, the threads strong as he hung her in midair. "You cannot breathe now," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Die from pain and suffocation. You cannot enchant to use magic either." "You're right," she said, her tone unnervingly steady. "I cannot do much now." The demon's grin widened, but then it faltered. "Wait," she was talking. "How?" His eyes narrowed as he noticed the faint glow of mana shimmering around her neck. She had reinforced it just before his threads could constrict her airway fully. "Clever," he hissed, launching a new set of razor-sharp threads at her. "You cannot live now." "You're right," Freren repeated, her tone mocking. The demon smirked again, his confidence unwavering, until her next words hit like a slap. "Is this the standard of demons now? This is enough to satisfy you? To make you believe you've won? How sad." "What?" Before he could finish, Freren raised a finger, a concentrated sphere of mana forming at its tip. With a small flick, the mana blasted forth, obliterating the demon's head in an instant. His body disintegrated into ether, leaving no trace of his existence. Freren landed softly on the ground, brushing imaginary dust off her clothes. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, who was slumped against the wall, snoring softly. His earlier attempts at suppressing his mana had clearly drained him, his meditation having devolved into sleep. "Naruto," she called, nudging him with her foot. "Wake up. Let me sleep, pervy sage," he mumbled, swatting weakly at the air. "We have to go," she insisted, her tone firm. "5 more minutes tilde," he groaned, curling further into himself. Freren sighed, exasperated. Was this how Fern felt every time she had to drag Freren out of her own bouts of lethargy? Perhaps she should stop teasing her apprentice about it. Or not. A few minutes later, Naruto and Freren emerged from the dim cell into a dimly lit corridor, only to find the body of a guard sprawled lifelessly near the entrance. The metallic tang of blood lingered faintly in the air. Naruto's eyes widened. "What?" Frieren stepped forward, her expression neutral as she examined the scene. A demon came. He killed the guard. Naruto turned to her, a mix of confusion and alarm on his face. What happened to the demon? I killed him. What? His voice rose in disbelief. Frieren glanced at him, her tone calm, almost clinical. Does that make you feel bad? It's either him or us. Naruto hesitated, his fists clenching. He averted his gaze, unable to answer immediately. Frieren gave him a moment before continuing. Regardless, we can't stay here. Harming a guard in this city is a major crime. With the demon's body disintegrated, there's no evidence of his involvement. If we're found here, we'll be accused of this. Oh, Naruto muttered, his voice low, his usual bravado dampened by the gravity of the situation. Let's go, Frieren said firmly, already moving down the corridor. Naruto followed after a moment, his mind racing. For once, he found himself quiet, unsure of what to make of the whole ordeal. As much as he wanted to argue, he couldn't deny the truth in Frieren's words. Frieren effortlessly conjured a shimmering cloak that draped over both her and Naruto, blending into the air around them like a faint ripple of water. Naruto's eyes sparkled with excitement. Cool, you gotta teach me that. Frieren gave him a sidelong glance. Learn how to mold your mana first. Naruto frowned, throwing his hands up. But you didn't even teach me that. You'll figure it out yourself. What? How long did it take you? Frieren tilted her head thoughtfully. About 20 years, I think. I've forgotten. 20 years. Naruto's jaw dropped. Frieren raised a hand, waving it dismissively. Don't worry. Humans are faster than elves. Naruto sighed with relief. Phew. But Frieren's lips quirked in a faint smirk. Though, judging by my observations. Naruto squinted at her suspiciously. What? Nothing. Frieren's tone was as unreadable as ever. Let's keep moving. The two melted into the crowd, their cloaked forms becoming indistinguishable from the bustling townsfolk. Naruto muttered under his breath, already vowing to master magic quicker than any hag ever could. Meanwhile, Frieren walked with quiet confidence, her keen eyes scanning for the next obstacle ahead. Fern and Stark, their keen eyes instantly recognizing the cloaked figures, hurriedly pulled Frieren and Naruto into a narrow, shadowy alleyway. The muffled bustle of the streets provided some cover, but Fern's expression was etched with worry. What are you two doing outside? She hissed, her gaze darting around, checking for onlookers. Frieren's face remained impassive. The guard was killed. We're the prime suspects. If we stay, we'll be executed, so we're leaving. Stark tightened his grip on his axe, his jaw clenching. Leaving? Are you kidding? The demons are planning to destroy the city, Frieren. We can't just abandon it. What? Naruto stepped forward, his jade eyes blazing with determination. If that's true, Stark's right, hag. People are depending on us. We've got to do something. Frieren let out a deep sigh, her expression softening. You two, you remind me of Himmel. Always rushing headfirst into danger. She paused, her tone taking on a wistful edge. But fine, listen closely, the demons are targeting the barrier of Flammel. If they succeed, Aura's army will flood the city, and nothing will stand in their way. Naruto tilted his head, his eyes narrowing as he glanced skyward. Aura, who's that? And what barrier? You mean that rainbowy thing up there? Fern froze mid-thought, her staff lowering slightly. Mr. Naruto, you can see the barrier. Naruto blinked, confused. Yeah, it's kind of faint but definitely there. Frieren's green eyes sharpened, her curiosity piqued. Interesting. Her gaze shifted to Stark and Fern. Listen up. You two will deal with the demons. Naruto, you're coming with me. Stark's eyes widened in disbelief. What? You're leaving us to fight those monsters on our own. They're strong, but you'll manage. Frieren replied calmly, already turning away. Stark's knuckles whitened around his axe. Frieren, this isn't a joke. They're not normal demons, they'll rip us apart. Frieren glanced back, her face as unreadable as ever. You've trained for moments like this. Don't waste your teacher's efforts. Naruto hurried after her, waving a hand toward Stark and Fern. Good luck, guys. Don't die on us. Fern sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. Well, Mr. Stark, it seems it's just us now. Stark let out an exasperated groan, hefting his axe over his shoulder. Great. If I don't survive this, I'm hunting Frieren for as long as she lives. Frieren and Naruto melted into the crowd, their cloaks shielding them from prying eyes. Naruto, however, couldn't keep quiet. So, this Aura person, how strong is she? Does she really have an army? Are we even ready for this? Should I be worried? Wait, are you worried? Frieren glanced at him, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. You'll find out soon enough. Now keep moving. As the two disappeared into the labyrinth of streets, Fern and Stark exchanged a glance, their resolve hardening. Let's get this over with, Fern said firmly. Stark rolled his shoulders, preparing for the battle ahead. Right, time to hunt some demons. Oh. Naruto's steps faltered as he caught sight of the massive army arrayed before them. His eyes widened. Whoa, that's a lot of knights. Quote, hundreds, no, thousands, of figures stood clad in gleaming, blackened armor. Each carried heavy swords and towering shields, their ranks disciplined and imposing. At their forefront stood a petite figure, a young girl, or rather, a demon, with scales embedded along her forearms, her stance casual but her grin chilling. Ah, Freren the Slayer, the demon girl drawled, her grin widening. You finally came. Aura, Freren replied flatly. Naruto blinked, stepping closer. That's Aura. No way. I thought she'd be, I don't know, bigger or scarier or something. Aura cast him a sidelong glance. Her grin unfaltering. And who is this? A human, clearly. Hardly any mana. Not a mage then, perhaps a warrior. Freren responded without a flicker of emotion. He's my apprentice. Aura raised a brow. I see. Naruto stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Yeah, the hag's my mentor. What's it to you, shorty? Aura laughed, a cold, hollow sound. He even talks like Himmel. How nostalgic. Her gaze turned sharp. But Himmel is long gone. And now, it's your turn, Freren. Freren's golden eyes narrowed slightly. We'll see. Wait, hold on. Naruto interjected, raising a hand. Can't we just talk this out first? Why are we even fighting? Is this revenge? Hatred? Something else entirely? Aura's grin didn't waver, but there was a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. That is a human city, she said simply. So, Naruto pressed, folding his arms. Aura sighed as if explaining to a child. I am a demon. Naruto frowned. And that means? Aura turned to Freren, visibly exasperated. Are you sure this isn't Himmel's son? He sounds exactly like him. Freren shrugged. Hey, Naruto huffed. For your information, my dad's Minato Namikaze. Ever heard of him? Fourth Hokage. Aura's patience snapped. Attack, she commanded, her voice sharp. With a thunderous roar, the undead surged forward like a black tide, weapons glinting under the sun. Freren's voice remained calm amidst the chaos. Naruto. What? He shouted, already bracing himself. You wanted to learn magic. Yeah, what about it? Let's see if you can defeat them without touching them. Naruto gawked at her. Are you serious? That's not possible. Freren's eyes gleamed faintly. Then let me show you a spell my master taught me. Naruto's jaw dropped as he watched Freren move through the battlefield. With a single word, shun, the undead knights crumbled like puppets with their strings severed. Her movements were fluid, like a dance. She stepped between their attacks gracefully, her green eyes calm. Her hand brushing the air as if conducting an invisible symphony. Each time she whispered the spell, another wave of knights fell, yet she never struck them directly. They're just falling. Naruto muttered in awe. Let me do it. Freren spared him a brief glance. No. Just watch. HMPH. HAG. He grumbled, crossing his arms. Unperturbed, Freren continued, her pace unbroken. Dozens of knights collapsed, their heavy armor hitting the ground in resounding clangs. In the distance, Aura remained still, her petite frame exuding confidence as she twirled the scales in her hands. You can't win. Freren, Aura called out, her voice ringing across the battlefield. No matter how elegantly you move or how many you drop, I have the most mana here, by far. Naruto frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. What does that even mean? Aura's eyes glinted as she smirked. These scales measure mana. The side with the greater mana controls the weaker. That's how I've commanded these knights for years, even long after their deaths. Their decayed bodies still serve me. She chuckled coldly. Such loyalty, wouldn't you agree? Naruto's eyes widened as the realization hit. So, all these knights, they're being controlled by you. He turned to Freren, a wave of clarity washing over him. That's why the hag didn't let me fight. She didn't want to disrespect the dead who'd already suffered enough. Tears welled in his eyes as he turned back to Aura, his voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. How could you do that? How could you take these people, these warriors who fought and lived, and force them to become your puppets? They deserve rest, peace, not this. Aura raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Oh, spare me your tears, human. They're just remnants of flesh and mana. Tools, nothing more. They were people. Naruto shot back, his voice cracking. They had dreams, families, lives. And you just ripped that away and made them your slaves. That's sick. You're worse than a monster, you're a coward hiding behind the dead because you're too scared to face the living. Aura's grin faltered for a moment, replaced by a glimmer of irritation. She lifted the scales high, their golden glow casting an eerie light. Fine, if you're so eager to face me, let's measure your worth, little human. I'll deal with Freren later. First, I'll crew, shish you and take your soul, make you my most loyal servant. Naruto wiped away his tears, his expression hardening as he stepped forward. I'm not scared of you. Behind him, Freren remained still, her face impassive as she observed the unfolding confrontation. Inside her head, Aura was grinning with triumph. The human boy had almost no visible mana, he was barely a flicker compared to her brilliance. A 12-year-old demon like her couldn't possibly be threatened by a child and a worn-out elf. Victory was inevitable. The mana scale floated between them, shimmering with anticipation. A white, radiant light streamed out of Aura's body, settling heavily on one side of the scale. A faint neon glow emerged from Naruto's chest, flickering as it rested on the other side. The scales tipped toward Aura instantly. She burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, as expected, you humans are nothing against a demon like me. Now, kneel before me. Naruto didn't budge. I said, kneel. Aura snarled, her smile thinning into irritation as Naruto glared at her with unyielding rage. Aura's lips pressed into a tight line. Willpower, huh, no matter. Then I guess I'll just have to kill you. You're not entirely wrong, Freren interjected calmly. He is stubborn. She gestured towards the scale with a small motion. But that's not the real issue here. What? Aura snapped, turning to the scale. Her confident grin faltered. The scales began to shift. Slowly, impossibly, Naruto's side grew heavier. Aura's eyes widened as the weight on Naruto's side increased, inch by inch. No, she whispered. The weight of Naruto's mana tipped the balance, pressing the scales down with a force that surpassed hers. Impossible, she gasped, watching in disbelief as the scales continued to shift until they broke apart in a burst of blinding light. Unable to contain the immeasurable force. What's happening? Stop suppressing it, Naruto, Freren said, her voice almost amused. What? Aura muttered, confused, her gaze darting between Freren and the boy. Then it happened. The faint neon glow within Naruto erupted, casting a dazzling light that swallowed the battlefield. His aura expanded outward, majestic and overwhelming. The shimmering energy flowed like a roaring river, illuminating the battlefield in radiant hues. It was no longer a faint flicker but a blazing inferno, twisting and spiraling, with a force that bent the very air around it. His mana wasn't just vast, it was alive, pulsating with a vibrancy that dwarfed anything Aura had ever encountered. The energy continued to expand, consuming her confidence and spreading across the field like a rolling tide, swallowing even the undead in its brilliance. The sheer majesty of it was undeniable, a storm that defied comprehension, and Aura, for the first time in centuries, felt fear creeping into her core. Naruto's fists clenched tightly, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow as he stepped forward. You're horrible, he shouted, his voice echoing across the battlefield. How could you do this? Taking away their freedom even after they died. Controlling them like puppets for your twisted goals. They're people. They deserved peace. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, his rage spilling out with every word. Let them go. Now. Aura's smug expression faltered, replaced by alarm as her body began to move against her will. Her eyes widened in horror. No, this can't be happening. She stammered, her voice quivering as her hand unsheathed her sword. Naruto froze. Huh, what's going on? Shish, Freren said softly, her gaze sharp and unrelenting. Aura's terrified cries filled the air as she raised the blade to her own throat, trembling uncontrollably. What's happening? Stop this, she screamed, her Aura mounting as her own hand pressed the cold steel against her neck. Naruto's heart raced as realization struck him. Wait, don't, stop, he yelled, reaching out. But it was too late. With a final, blood-curdling scream, Aura's blade sliced through, and her head fell to the ground. Her lifeless body collapsed as a deafening silence enveloped the battlefield. Naruto stood frozen, his face pale, his breath shaky. Did I just kill her? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Freren placed a hand on his shoulder, her tone calm yet firm. No, you freed them. As if on cue, the knights' bodies crumbled, releasing beautiful, glowing lights that floated gently into the sky like lanterns. Each light shimmered softly, casting a serene glow over the field. The scene was breathtaking, a bittersweet beauty in the midst of carnage. Naruto watched in awe and sorrow as the souls ascended, their light growing smaller as they disappeared into the heavens. Freren spoke again, her voice laced with quiet wisdom. Don't mourn for her. Sometimes, the right thing requires us to end something terrible. Not everyone deserves a second chance. Naruto didn't reply, his gaze fixed on the sky. Together, they stood in silence, watching as the souls found their peace. Oh. The next day, the lord of the city approached the party, gratitude evident in his every word. His voice cracked slightly as he thanked them for freeing the souls enslaved by Aura, including his own son. Kneeling solemnly before the sight of the fallen, he bowed his head in deep respect, murmuring words of thanks. Naruto, still somber but visibly better, scratched the back of his head. "No problem, old man," he said with a lopsided smile. The air froze. Fern and Stark exchanged panicked glances, and even Frieren raised an eyebrow. A tense silence loomed as the lord turned to Naruto, his expression unreadable. "Old man," Fern whispered furiously, tugging at Naruto's sleeve. "You just called a noble that. Are you trying to get us thrown in prison?" Naruto blinked in confusion. "What's the big deal? He is old." Stark buried his face in his hands, muttering, "We're doomed." Doomed. To everyone's surprise, the lord burst into hearty laughter. "I see no offense in the truth," he said, clapping Naruto on the shoulder. "You remind me of my own son, bold and straightforward. I like that." Naruto grinned. "Told ya it wasn't a big deal." The lord wished them well, offering his blessings for their journey ahead. With the situation diffused, the party set off once more. As they walked away, Fern muttered, "I swear, you'll get us all executed one day, Mr. Naruto." Naruto said, hands behind his head. Old man seemed cool with it. Frieren's lips quirked up ever so slightly. "It's strange, but somehow, you always survive your recklessness. And that's why I'm the best apprentice ever," Naruto declared proudly. "Debatable," Stark added with a smirk, earning a round of laughter as they continued on their way. The forest canopy filtered soft sunlight through its dense foliage, casting dappled shadows on the party as they trudged along. Naruto's persistent chatter broke the serene sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. "Come on, hag," Naruto whined, bounding up to Frieren like an overeager puppy. "I've already mastered suppressing my mana. Teach me something awesome now." Frieren didn't break stride. "Suppressing mana is only the first step. Your mana reserves are too great for even the simplest spells. Uncautious experiments can be fatal. You need to mold it properly before attempting spells." Naruto huffed, throwing his hands behind his head. "I can mold it. You just don't want to admit I'm ready." Frieren stopped abruptly, causing Stark to nearly bump into her. She turned to face Naruto. Her expression blank but her tone sharp. "Show me, then. If you're so sure, prove it. Create something with your mana." Naruto's lips curled into a cocky grin. "You asked for it." He extended his hand, and within seconds, a bright neon sphere materialized, spinning rapidly like a vortex. "Behold, the Rasengan." Fern froze, her eyes widening as she observed the concentrated sphere of energy. That's pure mana. And it's so controlled," she stammered, disbelief lacing her voice. "I've read about raw mana manipulation, but this is insane. It took me months to even manage a stable stream." Stark scratched his head, his limited understanding of magic making it hard to gauge the significance of the display. "Looks flashy enough. Is it good?" Before Fern could respond, Frieren raised a hand. Her expression unchanged. "It's a decent effort," she said dismissively, "but it's just a simple ball of mana. No finesse, no precision." Naruto's smug grin faltered. "What are you talking about? This thing could blow a tree clean off the ground." "That's power," Frieren countered. "Control is a different matter entirely." She raised her hand, and a tiny deer shimmered into existence on her palm, glowing faintly with blue mana. Its delicate legs moved with an almost lifelike grace, circling her hand in a smooth, fluid motion. Fern gasped audibly, and even Stark's jaw dropped. "The smaller and more intricate the creation, the greater the mana control," Frieren explained, her tone instructive. "This is art. What you've created," she glanced at the Rasengan still spinning in Naruto's hand, "is a sledgehammer compared to a scalpel." Naruto looked down at his Rasengan, his pride clearly dented. His shoulders slumped slightly before he glared up at Frieren. "Just say you don't want to teach me." Frieren arched an eyebrow. "If you're serious about learning, prove me wrong. Create something better than this deer." "Oh, I will." Naruto shot back, pointing dramatically at her. "I'll make something bigger, better, and more detailed. And when I do, you'll be begging me to teach you. You'll say, 'Master Naruto, show me your ways.'" Frieren's lips twitched as if she were suppressing a smile. "We'll see." "Of course we will, hag." Naruto stormed ahead, muttering to himself about stubborn mentors and impossible standards. Frieren resumed walking, her expression unreadable. Stark and Fern exchanged glances before falling into step behind her. "You think Frieren's being too hard on him?" Stark asked, keeping his voice low. Fern hesitated, glancing at the Rasengan, which Naruto had dissolved in frustration. Mr. Naruto's pure mana manipulation is extraordinary, she admitted. To create something like that without formal training, it's unheard of. But Mistress Furry, Ren's mana control is on an entirely different level. She's right about the intricacy and detail. Still, Stark said, frowning, she didn't make you jump through hoops like this when you started, did she? Fern shook her head, her brow furrowed. No, she just started teaching me spells. There was no prerequisite for precision. Then why is she making Naruto work so hard for it? Stark asked. Maybe it's because I already knew magic. Fern suggested, though her tone was uncertain. Or, maybe she sees something in him that she doesn't see in me. Stark laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe Uzumaki's just a prodigy. Fern didn't respond, her gaze lingering on Freren's back. Why is she pushing him so much? Ahead of them, Naruto continued muttering under his breath, glancing back occasionally at Freren. I'll show her. I'll make a whole zoo out of mana, and she'll have to admit I'm the best. Freren, seemingly oblivious, walked on, her thoughts as inscrutable as ever. Oh. The roar of the waterfall filled the forest. An unrelenting cacophony that seemed to mock Naruto as he sat cross-legged by its edge. His hand was outstretched, trembling with effort, as he tried to mold raw energy of his mana into something tangible. The glow of neon light flickered weakly in his palm before vanishing entirely. Damn it! Naruto growled, slamming his fist onto the damp grass. He leaned forward, beads of sweat mixing with the spray from the falls. He focused again, summoning the energy from within him. The sphere of mana flickered to life, spinning for a moment before collapsing into nothingness. This is impossible, he muttered to himself, his frustration building. How the heck does that hag make it look so easy? For what felt like hours, Naruto continued to try. The mana sphere would form, falter, and disappear every single time. His arms ached, his head throbbed, and his spirit wavered. He began to doubt himself. Maybe I really am just a dead last. Mr. Naruto. The soft voice startled him. And he turned to see Fern standing a few steps away, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. What are you doing here? Naruto asked, a little more curtly than he intended. Fern hesitated but stepped closer. I noticed you hadn't come back, so I thought I'd check on you. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his damp red hair. I'm trying to mold this stupid mana into something. Freren said I need to do it to learn any spells, but, he paused, showing her his empty palm. It's not working. Fern crouched beside him, observing his tired expression. You're trying too hard. Trying too hard. Naruto repeated, glaring at her. How am I supposed to not try? If I don't push myself, nothing's gonna happen. Fern shook her head gently. Mana doesn't work like that. It's not something you can force. It flows naturally when you're calm and focused. Naruto let out a bitter laugh. Oh, great. Another lecture. Got any tips, Miss Mana expert? Fern flushed slightly, averting her eyes. I can't give you any tips. What? Naruto shot up to his knees, staring at her in disbelief. You're joking, right? You're the hag's apprentice. Aren't you supposed to know this stuff? Fern's cheeks turned pink as she looked away, embarrassed. Mistress Freren is the expert, not me. I'm still learning. Compared to her, I'm just a novice. Naruto flopped back onto the grass, groaning dramatically. Wonderful. So if you're a novice, I guess that makes me the dead last. Fern frowned, her voice gentle but firm. No, Mr. Naruto. You're not a dead last. In fact, what you're already doing, I don't think I could do that. Not without my staff, at least. Huh. Naruto sat up again, staring at her. I mean, Fern hesitated, trying to find the right words. You've been molding your mana with just your hands, right? Without any tools or spells. That's incredible. I don't think I could manage that at all. Naruto blinked, her words sinking in. So, you're saying I'm good at this? Fern smiled faintly. What I'm saying is that you have a gift for magic. You just need to calm yourself and let it flow naturally. Stop trying to force it. Naruto tilted his head, pondering her words. A gift, huh? Fern stood, brushing off her robes. Just don't overthink it, Mr. Naruto. You'll figure it out. As she walked away, Naruto remained seated, staring at his open palm. He clenched it into a fist, Fern's words echoing in his mind. A gift. He turned his gaze toward the waterfall, the crashing water drawing his attention. An idea struck him. Rising to his feet, he moved closer to the falls, stepping carefully over the slick rocks. The spray of water grew heavier, drenching him entirely as he positioned himself beneath the powerful cascade. The force of the water was almost unbearable, pounding against his shoulders and back, but he grit his teeth and sat down, crossing his legs. He let the cold water envelop him, drowning out all other sensations. Closing his eyes, Naruto focused inward, shutting out the pain, the cold, and the roar of the falls. He reached deep into himself, feeling for the spark of energy that was his mana. At first, it was faint, like trying to grasp smoke. But gradually, as he calmed his breathing, he began to sense it more clearly, a warm, vibrant presence within him. He visualized the mana flowing like a river, weaving through his body. Slowly, he tried to guide it toward his palm, imagining it gathering there. He felt a faint flicker of energy in his hand. Focus. The flicker grew stronger, taking form as a faint glow of neon light. It trembled and wavered, but this time, it didn't vanish. Naruto smiled faintly, his determination renewed. Under the relentless waterfall, Naruto continued to meditate, shaping the mana bit by bit. Step by step, the path to mastery was long, but he wouldn't give up. Not now, not ever. Stark trudged through the forest, his arms full of firewood, when his eyes landed on Naruto sitting cross-legged under the pounding waterfall. Water crashed over him relentlessly, yet he didn't move, his focus unwavering. Frowning, Stark made his way to where Farron sat, her nose buried in a book. Hey, don't you think you're pushing him too hard? He's no expert in magic, and this seems a bit extreme for a beginner. Farron didn't glance up. He's the one who insisted on finding a spell that doesn't exist to return home. If he doesn't find it, he's vowed to create it. I'm merely preparing him for the challenge he's taken upon himself. Stark blinked, caught off guard. Creating a spell, isn't that something only the best of the best can do? Farron turned a page, her expression calm. It is. And if he truly intends to succeed, he'll need to push beyond his limits. This is nothing compared to the obstacles he'll face. Huh, Stark said, scratching the back of his head. He glanced toward Naruto again, watching him endure the waterfall's onslaught. You gotta admit, though, the guy's stubborn. Farron's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Stubbornness can be a virtue, Stark. When wielded correctly. Yeah, if it doesn't break him first. Stark shook his head, resuming his task. Better hope he's as tough as he thinks he is. Farron didn't respond, but her gaze briefly flicked toward Naruto. She closed her book with a soft snap, her expression unreadable. Oh. The night fell, casting a soft glow from the bonfire that flickered in their camp. The group sat around it, their shadows stretching into the surrounding forest. Stark leaned against a log, chewing lazily, while Fern quietly picked at her meal. Naruto, however, glared daggers at Farron from across the fire, his jade-green eyes glinting in the light. He huffed loudly, stabbing his food with unnecessary force. Farron, entirely unfazed, continued eating with her usual detached calmness. She didn't even glance up, her aloof demeanor only intensifying Naruto's frustration. The tension was palpable, the silence heavy. Stark looked between them, raising an eyebrow. Well, this is cozy, he muttered under his breath. Naruto finally snapped, slamming his bowl onto the ground. I tried all day under that stupid waterfall, and I got nothing. But no, you can't even teach me anything useful, can you, Master Farron? Fern winced, shrinking into herself, while Stark sighed, shaking his head. Farron set her bowl down slowly and looked at Naruto with an almost imperceptible tilt of her head. Are you finished? No, I'm not finished. Naruto shot back, his voice echoing through the quiet forest. You're supposed to be my mentor, but all you do is sit there, read your stupid books, and make me figure everything out on my own. Farron's expression didn't change. And yet, figuring things out on your own is the essence of magic. That's just an excuse for you to be lazy. Fern gasped softly, her eyes wide. Stark stifled a laugh, quickly disguising it as a cough. Farron finally let out a faint sigh. Naruto, if you cannot master the basics of control, then what hope do you have for advanced magic? Would you prefer I teach you something flashy that you'll only fail at? Naruto's fists clenched. I'm not asking for shortcuts. I'm asking for guidance. They locked eyes for a long moment, the tension crackling like the fire between them. Finally, Farron leaned back slightly. Her tone cool but not unkind. If you truly wish to prove me wrong, then do so. Show me that your determination can overcome your frustration. Naruto's glare softened slightly as her words sunk in. He crossed his arms, leaning back against a rock with a huff. Fine, I will. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence, save for Stark quietly chuckling to himself. You two are like an old married couple, he muttered, earning a sharp glare from both Naruto and Farron. He grinned, raising his hands in mock surrender. Just saying. The party trudged through the relentless snowstorm. the icy wind biting at their skin. They were deep in the north now, the heart of the frozen wilderness, and even Stark's usually easygoing demeanor was replaced by shivers and groans. The snow was too thick, the cold too harsh, and visibility was almost non-existent. Are we even going the right way? Naruto complained, hugging himself as he tried to stave off the cold. His jade-green eyes glared at Freren, who walked ahead, seemingly unaffected, or so he thought until she sneezed loudly. Naruto recoiled. "Ew. Hag, watch where you're sneezing." Freren sniffled, her nose slightly red from the cold. But she ignored him, continuing to lead them through the storm. "I knew we should have stopped for the night," Naruto muttered under his breath. "But no, I know the way," she said. He mimicked Freren's monotone voice in a mocking falsetto. "Are you questioning my sense of direction?" Freren finally asked, stopping and turning to face him with her usual calm expression. "Sense of direction? You mean your lack of it?" Naruto shot back. "You don't even know where we are, do you?" Freren blinked, then casually said, "We're lost." Naruto's jaw dropped. "What?" Before he could launch into another tirade, Freren sneezed again and wobbled slightly on her feet. "I might have pushed myself a little too hard," she admitted, swaying before collapsing into the snow. "Hag!" Naruto shouted, rushing to her side. "She's just unconscious," Stark said after a quick glance, crouching down to check on her. "Guess the cold got to her." "Well, I'm not carrying her," Naruto declared, crossing his arms. "Fine, I will," Stark offered, already reaching for her, his hands making weird gestures. Fern's eyes narrowed, and she took a step back, crossing her arms. "Pervert. What?" Stark looked at her, incredulous. "What did I do?" "You should know," Fern replied with a look of disgust. "I'm just trying to help." Fern huffed and moved forward, gently lifting Freren onto her back. "I'll do it. At least I can trust myself not to be weird about it." Naruto watched as Fern struggled to balance Freren's weight, her steps faltering in the thick snow. Her breaths came in heavy puffs of air. And despite her determination, it was clear she wouldn't last much longer. "Hey, give her here," Naruto said, stepping forward. Fern turned to him, surprised. "But you said." Yeah, I know what I said." Naruto interrupted, waving her off. "But I'm not gonna let you drop dead trying to carry her." Fern hesitated before nodding, carefully passing Freren to Naruto. He adjusted her on his back, muttering under his breath, "Hag's heavier than she looks." Stark smirked, raising an eyebrow. "Having fun, Uzumaki." "Shut it," Naruto growled, trudging ahead with Freren on his back. The group continued through the storm, the cold still relentless, but Naruto bore it with a stubborn determination. He glanced at Freren's unconscious face, her usually sharp features softened in sleep. "You better wake up soon." "Hag," he muttered, "I'm not carrying you forever." "Oh. Naruto trudged through the snow, Freren draped over his back like a sack of potatoes. The weight wasn't T. He problem, it was her complete lack of effort to wake up. She was far too comfortable, her head resting against his shoulder as if she were lounging in some fancy inn. "Wake up already, you lazy hag," Naruto growled, shifting her slightly as the group pressed on. Freren stirred but didn't open her eyes, muttering, "You're warm, so no." Naruto scowled. "If you don't wake up soon, I'm dropping you in a snowbank." Stark chuckled behind him. "She does seem to be enjoying this a bit too much." Fern, walking beside them, added, "She has to be faking it. There's no way she hasn't woken up yet." As if on cue, Freren's soft snores reached their ears. Naruto grumbled curses under his breath, but his steps remained steady as they continued. After what felt like hours of trudging through the relentless snow, a silhouette appeared in the distance. Stark was the first to spot it. "There's a cabin up ahead," he shouted, his voice barely cutting through the howling wind. The team quickened their pace, relief flooding their tired limbs. Reaching the cabin, Naruto kicked the door open with far more force than necessary. "Finally!" he exclaimed, stepping inside with Freren still slumped on his back. The interior was warm, a stark contrast to the icy storm outside, but what caught everyone's attention wasn't the cozy atmosphere, it was the topless man in the center of the room. The man, with tanned skin and pointed ears like Freren's, was doing push-ups on the wooden floor, his muscles rippling with each motion. The group froze, staring blankly. Fern broke the silence with a horrified yell. "Pervert!" Summoning her staff, she aimed a spell at him. Wait. The man leapt to his feet, hands raised in defense. "I'm not a pervert. I was just trying to keep warm. I'm no mage, I can't cast fire spells." Fern hesitated, her staff still glowing. "Oh." Naruto, meanwhile, was done with his burden. He unceremoniously dropped Freren onto the wooden floor with a loud thud. "Ouch!" Freren exclaimed, finally opening her eyes. Naruto crossed his arms, glaring at her. About time you woke up, hag. Do you know how long I've been carrying you? You're heavier than a bag of rocks. Frieren sat up, rubbing her back. It's not my fault you volunteered. Maybe you should work on your strength. Naruto's eye twitched. Strength. I carried you through a blizzard, you ungrateful. Maybe next time I'll let Stark carry me. Frieren interrupted with a shrug, completely unfazed. Like hell you will. That pervert wouldn't even hesitate. Hey, Stark cut in, offended. Why am I getting dragged into this? The topless man, now clothed, cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. If you're done arguing, can we talk like civilized people? Stark pointed at him. You're an elf, aren't you? A tense silence followed. The man sighed, pulling on a shirt. Yes, I see you have one in your party too. Frieren stood, brushing herself off. I am Frieren the mage. Her tone was impassive, as always. Kraft the monk. The man introduced himself with a polite nod. Nice to meet you all. I'm Stark the warrior. Fern, a mage, Fern added, still eyeing him warily. Naruto stepped forward, puffing out his chest. And I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the, mage. Warrior. I don't know. I'm this hag's apprentice, but I'm great at hand-to-hand combat and sneaking around too. Oh, and I know some basic healing ninjutsu, Not that you'd know what ninjutsu is, but forget it. Basically, I'm an all-rounder, believe it. Kraft raised an intrigued eyebrow. A general. Naruto blinked. A general, Kraft repeated. It's what we call individuals whose skills are equivalent to that of a full party. They used to be around long ago. Frieren tilted her head. I've never heard of that term before. Kraft shrugged. It's an old classification. Most generals I knew were from centuries ago. They were exceptional individuals capable of standing alone against armies or disasters. Naruto scratched the back of his head. His jade green eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Well, I'm not that good yet, but I guess I could be someday. Arrogant, Frieren muttered, earning a glare from Naruto. I'll prove it to you one day, hag. He declared, pointing at her. Kraft chuckled. You two seem close. Close. Naruto and Frieren exclaimed in unison, glaring at each other. Don't lump me with this old hag. Naruto yelled. And don't associate me with this loud fool, Frieren retorted calmly. The rest of the team exchanged amused glances before settling in, grateful for the shelter and warmth the cabin provided. Outside, the storm raged on. But for now, they were safe. The group trudged through the snow-laden forest, their breaths visible in the frigid air as they followed Kraft to the fallen tree he had mentioned. The cold gnawed at their skin, but they pushed on, determined to gather firewood to keep the cabin warm through the night. When they finally arrived, Kraft gestured at a massive tree lying on its side. Half buried under a blanket of snow. Beneath it, branches and logs jutted out, partially crushed but still usable. Fern stepped forward, clutching her staff. I'll lift it with magic. This should be quick. Wait, Naruto interrupted, stepping in front of her. A grin spread across his face as he raised a hand. Let me try something first. I've been working on a new trick. Fern looked skeptical, while Kraft folded his arms. You sure about this, kid? This tree's not going to move itself. Naruto waved him off, his jade green eyes sparkling with confidence. Trust me, you're about to witness something awesome. He closed his eyes, extending his hand as a swirling orb of bright energy began to form in his palm. The air around them grew heavy as the sphere pulsed with power. Its neon light reflecting off the surrounding snow. Rasengan, Naruto announced triumphantly. Before anyone could react, Kraft grabbed Fern and yanked her back several feet. Mr. Kraft, what are you doing? Fern protested, struggling in his grip. You'll thank me later, Kraft said firmly, his eyes glued to Naruto. Naruto lunged forward, slamming the Rasengan into the base of the fallen tree. A deafening roar shattered the forest's silence, and the ground beneath them trembled violently. Snow erupted into the air in a swirling vortex, carried by a fierce wind that howled like a living beast. When the chaos subsided, the scene before them was unrecognizable. The fallen tree, the branches, the firewood, everything was gone. In their place stretched a wide, barren path, the snow melted away to reveal dark, churned earth. The destruction extended for kilometers, a perfectly straight line through the forest. Naruto scratched his head, his grin turning sheepish. Oops. Guess I overdid it. Fern's jaw dropped. Overdid it. You vaporized everything. The tree, the wood, the snow, it's all gone. Yeah, but look on the bright side. Naruto gestured to the newly created road. We've got a clear path now. Kraft shook his head, his expression a mix of disbelief and amusement. Kid, your mana output is something else. I've never seen a human, or any mage, generate this much power in one go. Naruto blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, Kraft said quickly, though his eyes remained thoughtful. Before they could continue, Freren and Stark arrived, drawn by the commotion. Freren's gaze swept over the destruction, her golden eyes narrowing. "What did you do this time?" she asked flatly. Naruto winced. "I just tried my Rasengan, and, maybe I went a little overboard." Freren smacked him on the back of the head, hard enough to make him stumble. "Hey, what was that for?" Naruto yelped, rubbing the sore spot. "That's why I told you not to use magic until you've mastered the basics," Freren said. Her tone icy. Naruto crossed his arms, scowling. "You didn't have to hit me. I was just trying to help." "Help?" Freren gestured at the barren path. "Where's the wood we came here for?" "Oh, right, it doesn't exist anymore because you blew it to Kingdom Come." Naruto opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. She had a point. "Well," Kraft interjected, smirking, "we may not have wood. But we've got a new road. Stark, why don't you help me find some firewood along it?" "Sure thing," Stark said, chuckling as he followed Kraft. Fern stayed behind, watching the brewing argument between Freren and Naruto. "You're impossible, hag," Naruto shouted. "And you're reckless," Freren shot back. Fern sighed, shaking her head. They were at it again. As frustrating as their constant bickering could be, there was something oddly comforting about it. It was as if their arguments masked a deeper camaraderie, a bond neither of them would openly admit. Kraft and Stark disappeared down the road, leaving Freren, Naruto, and Fern alone in the clearing. Freren turned to Fern, her usual impassive expression softening slightly. "Let's head back to the cabin," she said. "There's no point in staying here." Fern nodded, glancing at Naruto, who was still muttering under his breath about bossy old hags and stupid trees. As they made their way back, the forest seemed quieter. The animals still wary after the earlier chaos. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the snow. Inside, Freren settled into a corner with her book, while Naruto plopped down near the fire, still fuming. Fern tried to lighten the mood by recounting a story from her early days of magic training, but Naruto barely listened, his gaze fixed on Freren. "She's so bossy," he muttered. Fern hid a smile, knowing full well that despite his complaints, Naruto respected Freren more than he'd ever admit. As the fire crackled and the cabin grew warmer, the tension began to ease. They were an odd group, but somehow, they always managed to make things work. For now, at least, they had a roof over their heads and a fire to keep the cold at bay. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they could rest, arguments and all. The cabin grew warmer as Stark and Kraft returned, their arms loaded with firewood. They stomped off their boots and placed the wood near the hearth. "The road's already covered in snow again," Kraft said, shaking his head. "And the visibility's shot. We're not going anywhere until this storm lets up." Stark groaned, stretching his arms. "Great. Just what I needed, being snowed in." Fern was busy tending to a pot over the fire, cooking dried meat and seasoning it with herbs she'd brought along. In the corner, Freren was curled up under a blanket, snoring softly, completely unbothered by the chaos around her. Kraft and Stark struck up a conversation about past battles, their voices low but lively. Meanwhile, Naruto sat apart from the group, staring at his hand, the earlier Rasengan still fresh in his mind. His thoughts churned. That attack, it was on par with the wind-style Rasenshuriken he'd developed back home. Yet he had barely tried. The sheer power it unleashed, wiping out the tree, the snow, and carving a path through the forest, was something he hadn't anticipated. "Am I really this strong now?" he whispered to himself, clenching his fist. But the thought gave him no solace. What good was strength if it couldn't solve his real problem? The spell to take him home, his ultimate goal, remained frustratingly out of reach. He'd searched through every book Freren had let him borrow, racked his brain for solutions, and even considered crafting a new spell from scratch. But it had been 10 days since they'd begun this journey, and he was no closer to finding a way back. The worst part was the lack of progress in his training. Freren, the so-called legendary mage, seemed more interested in napping than teaching. Any time Naruto pressed her for guidance, she'd wave him off with a vague comment or a cryptic remark. And Fern, she refused to offer tips because Freren had forbidden it, claiming that Naruto needed to figure things out on his own. He needed to get back home. His friends, Kakashi, Sakura, everyone, they were waiting for him. The thought of never seeing them again was unbearable. "Food's ready," Fern called, snapping him out of his thoughts. She glanced at him, her expression soft. "Aren't you hungry, Mr. Naruto?" Naruto's stomach growled loudly, answering for him. He grinned sheepishly. Standing up. "I'm starving, you know." Fern handed him a bowl of steaming stew, and the warm aroma immediately lifted his spirits. He joined the group near the fire. Though his gaze kept drifting to Freren, still blissfully asleep. As they ate, Naruto's determination solidified. He wasn't going to wait around for Freren to take him seriously. If she wouldn't help, he'd figure it out himself, even if it meant pushing his limits every single day. Naruto drifted into an uneasy sleep, and his dream began in a dimly lit wooden house. The floor creaked under his feet as he walked. Its walls lined with old, faded timber. It smelled of dust and aged parchment. Looking around, he saw a huge library stacked with scrolls and books, the kind that seemed ancient and precious. Some were rolled tightly, others frayed at the edges, their words long faded. "Where am I?" Naruto muttered, turning in circles as he searched for an exit. The silence was heavy. A voice called out faintly from outside. "Master, you're late." Naruto froze. Who had spoken? Master. Him. Slowly, he walked towards a window, the glass foggy from the cold outside. He wiped it with his hand and peered through to see Freren. But something was off. She wasn't in her usual travel attire. Instead, she wore an old-fashioned frock, her demeanor far softer than he was used to. He gazed back at him with a skeptical look. "You're supposed to teach me your favorite spell," she said impatiently. "What the?" Naruto began, but his words died as he caught sight of his reflection in the window. A woman stared back at him. Her red hair flowed like molten fire, cascading over her shoulders. Her eyes were sharp, her face elegant but unfamiliar, save for the nagging feeling that he had seen her before, just once. Before arriving in this strange new world. "What is going on?" he whispered, but the words came from his reflection as if spoken by someone else. His heart pounded as he reached for his face, only to find the reflection mimicked him perfectly. Restless as ever, "I see," his mouth said, but the voice was not his own. He stepped back from the window in shock, his hands trembling. Without thinking, he moved toward the house's door, drawn by something unseen. When he stepped outside, he found himself in a lush clearing, the air crisp and cool. Freren stood in the center, arms crossed. Her expression a mixture of irritation and expectation. "Are you going to waste more time, or will you show me the spell?" Naruto, or the person he seemed to be, put a hand on his hip, and with a flourish, a staff appeared in his grip. It felt natural, as if he had wielded it 1,000 times before. "All right, watch closely," he heard himself say. The voice was calm, self-assured. He swung the staff in an elegant arc, a movement so fluid it felt like part of a dance. "Rajni." The word left his lips with power, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the staff began to shimmer. Light burst forth, washing over the clearing like a sunrise. The once empty ground transformed, now teeming with life. Flowers of every color and species sprang from the soil, vibrant reds, deep blues, and soft yellows weaving into a tapestry of nature. Some glowed faintly, others sparkled as if kissed by dew. The clearing was alive, radiant and breathtaking. Naruto, or the woman he inhabited, smiled, admiring the beauty of the spell. Freren stared, unimpressed. "It's okay," she said flatly, her arms still crossed. "Cool, I guess. But it's ultimately useless." Naruto's, or the woman's, laughter rang out suddenly. Rich and genuine. He, or she, leaned forward, patting Freren on the head with an affectionate grin. The height difference was apparent, he was taller, older. "This spell will one day save the world," the voice said with a conviction that startled even Naruto. Freren tilted her head. "How?" "You'll know soon enough." The world around him began to blur, the vibrant flowers fading into darkness. Naruto felt himself falling, the laughter still lingering on his lips as he woke up abruptly. Back in his own body, he stared at the cabin's wooden ceiling, his breathing uneven. "What was that?" he muttered, his hand brushing against his face. He could still feel the remnant of that smile, the warmth of that clearing. "Flom," he whispered. That name echoed in his mind. Still lying in bed, Naruto rubbed his eyes and decided to test something. He extended his hand, trying to summon the staff he'd wielded in the dream. Nothing. Figures, he grumbled, rolling onto his side. "Guess I'll try again tomorrow." His fatigue won over curiosity as he sank deeper into the warmth of the blankets, letting sleep reclaim him. What he didn't see was Freren, nestled under her own blanket. Her eyes half open and fixed on him. Her gaze flickered as a faint shimmer of mana sparked in Naruto's hand, a brief outline of a staff began to form. But just as quickly, it disappeared when Naruto gave up. Freren's expression softened, though her eyes remained unreadable. "I don't get you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Even thousands of years after your death, maybe I'll understand now." She closed her eyes, letting the weight of memories and mysteries settle, as the cabin fell into silence. The next morning, Naruto sat cross-legged, focusing intensely on summoning the staff. He clenched his fist and closed his eyes, imagining every detail from his dream. Still, nothing materialized. Fern, observing him with a puzzled expression, asked, "You were never given a staff. So what exactly are you trying to summon?" Naruto groaned and flopped back, frustrated. "I had this dream where I was Flom and teaching the hag," he pointed at Freren, who snored softly in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, how to create a garden of flowers. Fern tilted her head. Flom, as in Mistress Freren's master. Yeah, it felt so real. There was a library, scrolls everywhere. And then bam, I'm outside swinging a staff and doing cool magic. But now, nothing. Fern opened her mouth to comment but paused, her thoughts unreadable. Kraft, who had been quietly eating, set his bowl aside and asked, "How old are you, exactly?" 16, or 13 now, thanks to the hag. Naruto huffed. Kraft studied him carefully. "I see. Even so, your mana levels are far beyond any ordinary mage." Quote. Naruto grinned, scratching the back of his head. "Well, what can I say? I've always had big reserves. Chakra or mana, doesn't matter. Back home, people called me an energy monster." Kraft leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me, where did the dream begin?" In a wooden house, I think." "Why? Did you see her reflection?" Kraft asked, ignoring the counter question. Naruto frowned. "Yeah, how do you know that?" "The staff," Kraft pressed. "What did it look like?" Naruto squinted, recalling the shimmering image. It looked like the hag's, but better. It had this purple gem that shimmered. And the whole thing was golden. Really fancy. Kraft leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Naruto, I've been a monk for a long time, and I can tell you this much, that was no ordinary dream." Stark, munching on a piece of bread, perked up. "Oh yeah, what was it, then?" Kraft smiled cryptically. "I have my suspicions, but it might be more fun if you figure it out yourself." Naruto groaned. Do all you elves hate me or something?" Fern, ever polite, shook her head. "It's not like that, mister." Naruto. "Mistress Freren is just, peculiar." Stark chuckled. "That's putting it lightly." Naruto pouted. "Great. Everyone's out to mess with me." Kraft gestured to the table, where Fern was setting out breakfast. "Speaking of messing around, let's eat. Someone wake Freren." Naruto's face lit up with mischief. He grabbed a glass of cold water and marched over to Freren, dumping it over her head. Freren shot up, her blanket falling off as she blinked wildly. "Where's the enemy?" Stark burst out laughing so hard he almost choked on his food, while Fern sighed, rubbing her temples. "Calm down, hag. The only enemy here is your laziness," Naruto teased, sitting down with a smug grin. Freren glared at him, water dripping down her face. Naruto. "Yes, mistress," he replied innocently. "I'm going to turn you into a frog." "Oh, please, you wouldn't dare." "I might." Their bickering continued, filling the cabin with laughter as the snow outside piled up higher. Naruto was beyond frustrated. Days had passed, and the snowstorm outside showed no sign of stopping. Trapped in the cabin, he stomped back and forth like a restless tiger. Stark was fine company but not much of a conversationalist, and Fern spent most of her time either reading or sitting in contemplative silence. Kraft would chat occasionally but was often lost in prayers, leaving Naruto feeling like he was stuck in a monastery rather than a team camp. Worst of all, Freren, his so-called master, refused to teach him anything useful. She lounged, slept, and read as if she didn't have an apprentice dying to learn. One evening, Naruto had had enough. "You call yourself a teacher? Huh, let's see how you like being the student," he muttered, a devilish grin spreading across his face. After some preparation, Naruto placed a bucket of cold water precariously on the cabin door. Next, he smeared honey on her favorite book and set a tripwire trap near her blanket pile. Finally, he used a small brush to carefully paint, useless hag, in washable ink on her forehead while she napped. The next morning, Freren walked into her first surprise. As the bucket tumbled, soaking her from head to toe, she froze, blinking in disbelief. Stark nearly choked on his breakfast laughing, while Faye RN tried to hide her amusement behind her book. Kraft offered a neutral but amused hum, clearly trying not to encourage Naruto. Freren wiped the water from her face, glaring daggers at Naruto. "You have 2 seconds to explain." Naruto grinned cheekily. "That's for being the laziest teacher in the history of teachers." Her eyes narrowed as she sat down, only to recoil when her fingers stuck to the honey-covered book. Naruto. "Oops, did I forget to warn you about that?" he said, feigning innocence. The final straw came when she reached for her blanket and tripped over the wire, landing in an unceremonious heap. As she sat up, her messy hair sticking out in all directions, the inked words on her forehead became clearly visible. Stark couldn't hold it anymore, bursting out, "Useless hag. That's a masterpiece." Naruto doubled over laughing. "I'm just returning the favor, hag. Now maybe you'll actually teach me something." Frieren, wet, sticky, and thoroughly annoyed, pointed a finger at Naruto. "You'll regret this, brat. I'll make you practice mana control for 10 hours straight tomorrow." Naruto smirked. "Bring it on, hag." The cabin was tense yet lively, as Naruto's antics finally added some energy to their snowbound days. Oh. The snowstorm continued to rage, blanketing the area in relentless white. Inside the magically cleared sparring area, the biting cold seemed to melt away as Naruto and Stark squared off. Fern stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching with mild disapproval. Kraft sat on a log near the cabin, watching the two with a faint smile, his eyes betraying deep curiosity. Stark shifted his axe, resting it on his shoulder. "Are you sure about this, Naruto? You're Frieren's apprentice, not a warrior. I don't want to hurt you." Naruto cracked his knuckles, grinning. "Don't worry about me. The question is, can you keep up?" He crouched slightly, his body light on his feet, red hair whipping in the icy wind. "Come at me, Stark. Show me what you've got." Stark gave an amused snort and rolled his shoulders. "All right, but don't blame me if you get knocked flat." As the spar began, Stark made the first move, charging forward with surprising speed for a man of his size. He swung his axe in a wide arc, aiming to disarm rather than harm. But before the blade could even get close, Naruto vanished from sight. "What the?" Stark turned just in time to see a blur of white and red dart past him. He swung his axe defensively, but Naruto ducked under it with ease, landing a sharp jab to Stark's side before dashing away. "Too slow," Naruto called out, his grin widening as he spun and came at Stark again, this time aiming for his legs. Stark barely managed to jump back, his boots skidding in the snow. "You're fast. Faster than my old master, Aizen. How's a kid like you moving like this?" Naruto laughed, dodging another swing of the axe. "Hand-to-hand combat's my thing. Maybe you should ask your old master how to keep up, yeah." Fern sighed from the sidelines. "Idiots, both of them," she muttered, though she couldn't hide the faint curiosity in her eyes. Stark adjusted his stance, this time opting for a defensive posture. He waited, letting Naruto make the first move. Naruto smirked, darting forward in a blur. His fist shot out, but Stark parried it with the haft of his axe, using the momentum to push Naruto back. "Not bad," Naruto admitted, sliding to a stop. "But let's kick it up a notch." Before Stark could respond, Naruto surged forward again, moving even faster than before. His white robes blended with the snow, making him nearly invisible. Stark swung his axe wildly, trying to catch the boy, but Naruto was always a step ahead. The fight grew more intense, their movements a blur of strikes, dodges, and counterattacks. Stark's bridge eats came heavier as he struggled to keep up. Naruto, on the other hand, seemed to only grow more energetic. "This is ridiculous," Stark finally shouted, swinging his axe in a desperate attempt to land a hit. But Naruto vaulted over the swing, flipping in midair and landing behind Stark. He tapped the warrior lightly on the shoulder before darting away. "You're wide open," Naruto taunted, laughing. Stark growled, adjusting his grip on the axe. "All right, no more playing around." He charged again, this time with full force. But Naruto was ready. As Stark closed the distance, Naruto's hand began to glow faintly with mana. He smirked, shifting his stance. "Let's see how you handle this." Stark's instinct screamed at him to stop, but it was too late. Naruto's palm surged with mana as he aimed a devastating strike at Stark's chest. Stark raised his axe to block, but the energy radiating from Naruto's hand was unlike anything he'd ever faced. Just as Naruto's glowing hand was about to connect, Kraft appeared. Moving faster than seemed possible, the monk grabbed Naruto mid-attack and hurled him away. Naruto crashed into the snow, groaning as the impact left him half-conscious. The ground trembled violently as Naruto's glowing fist struck the earth. A shockwave rippled through the clearing, splitting the ground and sending snow flying in all directions. "What the hell was that for?" Naruto groaned, sitting up and rubbing his head. Kraft stood over him, his expression calm but firm. "You were about to cripple your friend, Naruto." Naruto blinked, his confusion evident. "What? No, I wasn't. You channeled too much mana into your strike," Kraft explained. "If I hadn't intervened, you would have shattered his weapon and broken his ribs, at the very least." Stark, who had been frozen in shock, finally lowered his axe. You're kidding, that could have happened. Kraft nodded solemnly. Naruto's power is immense, but his control is lacking. That makes him dangerous, not just to his enemies, but to his allies as well. Naruto looked down at his hand, the faint remnants of mana still crackling around his fingers. I didn't mean to, his voice trailed off, guilt weighing heavily on him. Stark approached, placing a reassuring hand on Naruto's shoulder. Hey, kid, don't beat yourself up. That was something else. But next time, maybe tone it down a bit, yeah. Naruto let out a sheepish laugh, scratching the back of his head. Yeah, maybe I went a little overboard. From the sidelines, Fern watched the scene unfold. Her gaze lingered on Naruto, a mix of emotions flickering in her eyes. Jealousy, curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite place. Kraft helped Naruto to his feet, dusting the snow off his robes. You have potential, Naruto. But potential without discipline is a dangerous thing. Remember that. Naruto nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, I get it. Thanks, I guess. Fern extinguished the glowing runes in the snow, muttering under her breath. Idiots, all of them. As they made their way back to the cabin, the sparring match left an impression on everyone. Stark couldn't stop replaying the fight in his mind, amazed at Naruto's speed and power. Fern remained quiet, her thoughts a tangled mess. And Naruto, though still a bit shaken, couldn't help but feel a small surge of pride. Next time, he said with a grin, I'll take it even easier on you, Stark. Stark laughed, shaking his head. Next time, try not to destroy the clearing, okay. Naruto chuckled, the tension from earlier finally beginning to fade. No promises. Oh. Naruto sat, cross-legged in the small clearing he had made, the crisp air biting at his skin but ignored as his focus sharpened. His desire to return home burned within him, fueling his determination. The Rasengan was not enough. He had mastered it long ago. Even the Rasenshuriken, with its devastating power, was no longer a challenge. He needed something precise, intricate, something that reflected the control and refinement Freren expected of him. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath, his hand extended before him. Mana coalesced in his palm, spinning and swirling into the familiar form of a Rasengan. But this time, he didn't stop there. Slowly, painstakingly, he imagined the energy shifting, evolving step by step. First, he envisioned a perfect sphere, smoothing out any imperfections in the swirling energy. The Rasengan stabilized, its surface gleaming with unnatural precision. All right, he murmured to himself, his voice steady but strained. Next, he willed the sphere to stretch, elongating it into an oval shape. The mana resisted, vibrating as if alive, but he pushed through, his concentration unwavering. Sweat beaded on his forehead, yet he refused to falter. The oval flickered, threatening to collapse back into chaos. But Naruto tightened his focus. With a final effort, the shape held. Yes. His eyes opened briefly, excitement flashing across his face before he refocused. The next step was even harder. He visualized a cube, a form completely unnatural for spinning energy. Slowly, carefully, he bent the swirling mana to his will, forcing it to align into sharp edges and flat planes. It was like trying to carve a sculpture from a raging storm. When he opened his eyes again, a small, pulsating cube hovered above his palm. It wasn't perfect, the edges wavered, and the corners seemed to blur, but it was progress. Not bad, he muttered, though his heart swelled with pride. But it wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed to create something that surpassed Freren's summoned deer. Something that proved he could master mana manipulation. His mind raced as he considered the possibilities. What could I make? He mused aloud, his voice tinged with frustration and excitement. A bird? A dragon? No. Those were too grand, too unfocused. He needed something symbolic, something that reflected his journey. His dream of conjuring a garden of flowers as Flom lingered vividly in his mind. It wasn't just a random memory, it felt like a challenge, a clue to the refinement he needed. The task before him wasn't about power or destruction, it was about creation. With a deep breath, he extended his hand. Mana swirled, forming a small Rasengan in his palm, but he didn't stop there. Focus, steady, he murmured, closing his eyes. The mana sphere transformed into an oval-shaped structure before evolving into a cube. He visualized the simple beauty of a dandelion, its delicate petals glowing faintly, each detail etched into his mind. He didn't aim for perfection immediately. Instead, he broke the process into steps, shaping the spinning energy bit by bit. The sphere compressed into a thin, elongated stem, trembling under the strain of his control. The stem wavered, and for a moment, he thought it might collapse. But he gritted his teeth and pushed through. All right, now for the hard part. Gently, he He began shaping the petals, thin and intricate, each one requiring immense focus. His breath slowed as he poured his will into the task, sweat forming on his brow despite the icy air around him. The Rasengan's familiar hum shifted into something softer, more melodic, as the shape evolved. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Naruto opened his eyes. In his palm rested a neon dandelion, its glowing petals shimmering softly against the winter gloom. "I did it," he whispered, awestruck by his creation. It wasn't perfect, the petals flickered slightly, and the stem curved awkwardly, but it was a flower, fragile yet radiant. Naruto held it up, examining its delicate beauty. The faint light reflected in his blue eyes, filling him with an odd sense of peace. This wasn't just a step forward, it was a new beginning, a symbol of what he could achieve with patience and control. But it wasn't enough. "Not yet. I need to do better," he said, his voice steady with determination. He released the flower, letting it dissolve back into the air. "A whole garden, I'll make a whole garden like in the dream." Sitting back, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. For once, he felt closer to understanding the purpose behind Freren's endless lessons and the precision she demanded. If he could master this, perhaps he could find the spell to take him home, and even more. He released the mana once more, letting it fade as he leaned back and sighed deeply. For the first time in days, he felt a spark of genuine hope. This was the path forward, not just brute strength, but mastery. Weeks passed, each day blurring into the next as Naruto continued his relentless training. The cabin became a haven of quiet determination and solitude. While snowstorms howled outside, Naruto worked tirelessly to refine his control over mana. His goal was clear, to create something as beautiful and intricate as the garden from his dream. Each attempt brought progress, yet frustration lingered. The dandelions he conjured lacked the vibrant glow he sought, the stems too rigid, the petals too uneven. Still, he persisted, driven by the hope that mastery would lead him closer to returning home. During this time, his companions watched him silently. Stark admired his perseverance, while Fern remained cautious, unsure of what to make of his abilities. Freren, as enigmatic as ever, observed with an unreadable expression, occasionally offering cryptic remarks. Despite all these, Naruto's resolve grew stronger. He wasn't just practicing for the sake of power, he was rediscovering the essence of creation itself, a delicate balance between strength and artistry. He knew that this was only the beginning of his journey. After dinner, as the cabin settled into its usual quiet, Naruto stood up and declared, "I've perfected pure mana manipulation." His voice carried a confidence that made everyone turn to him. Kraft leaned forward, intrigued. Without hesitation, Naruto extended his hand. In his palm, a faint shimmer began to glow. Slowly, a delicate, neon dandelion formed, its petals radiant. Almost alive. Fern blinked. "It's nice, but it looks pretty ordinary," Stark said, scratching his head. Kraft, however, smirked knowingly. "Now this is art." Fern tilted her head in confusion. Naruto, basking in their mixed reactions, smugly turned to Freren and shoved the glowing flower close to her face. "What do you think, hag? Isn't it better than your boring little deer?" Freren avoided looking directly at it, her expression unreadable. Fern, puzzled by Freren's reaction, asked, "Mistress, what's so special about this flower?" Freren sighed, her reluctance evident. "What he's done, it took me over a decade to master pure mana manipulation to this degree." "What?" Fern's eyes widened in shock. "This level of control." "Yes," Freren admitted, her voice low. "But he's done more than just match it. He's evolved it." Naruto tilted his head. "What do you mean by evolved?" Freren gestured at him. "Show them." Naruto raised an eyebrow, but brought his other hand close to the dandelion. As the second hand approached, the flower grew larger, its petals expanding outward. The glow intensified, and shapes began to form within the petals. Like living paintings trapped in the soft luminescence. Fern gasped as she saw the first image, the silhouettes of children playing in a garden of flowers. Then another appeared, a chef, meticulously cooking. The spiral of his work blending into the flower's texture. A woman danced gracefully, her movements so fluid it was as if she were alive. A man with a sword swung it in perfect arcs, his silhouette sharp and purposeful. Next, a boy sat under a moonlit sky, talking with an old man whose face radiated wisdom. A man and a woman held a newborn baby, the tenderness in their silhouettes almost tangible. More scenes emerged. A hunter running through a forest, bow in hand. A blacksmith hammering away, sparks flying like stars. A lonely figure standing on a cliff, staring at the ocean waves below. The images shifted seamlessly, each more vivid than the last. Stark stood frozen, his axe forgotten. That's impossible. Fern was utterly speechless, her staff slipping from her grasp. Kraft, ever the contemplative one, gave a slow nod of appreciation. Naruto, you've created something truly remarkable. This isn't just mana manipulation. It's storytelling. It's life. Naruto couldn't help the grin spreading across his face. He turned to Freren, leaning closer with his signature smugness. So, hag, am I better than you now? I told you I'd beat your dear. Freren narrowed her eyes but finally relented. Fine, I'll start teaching you spells. Naruto's face lit up like a child on his birthday. Heck yeah. He punched the air, his earlier frustrations forgotten. As he dandelion dissolved back into pure mana, the room remained silent, the weight of what they had just witnessed lingering. For the first time in weeks, the air was filled with something more than frustration or monotony, it was filled with awe. Author note. Do you think Freren is going to teach him Zolteric? Or maybe a powerful defense spell? How about a levitation spell? I wonder. Edit. Naruto can use his ninja skills, true. He just hasn't had any opportunity to do so. I mean, if you're thinking about clones, then I say he can still do it. He didn't use shadow clones in this chapter because he didn't need it. Naruto succeeded in making the flower, right? You asked some questions, about pairings, sage mode etc. I will gradually answer them. No spoilers. However, I have planned exactly how to write till the mage exams. Thus, I need ideas beyond that. If you don't want to, then it's totally fine, I'll come up with my own, something I prefer. Thanks for reading this chapter. The next chapter will be released soon. Drop your thoughts in the review section. Your words motivate me to write better, larger and with more depth. Naruto eagerly waited as Freren prepared to teach him his first spell. His excitement was palpable as Freren finally uttered the enchant word, Saf, and instructed him to practice its pronunciation. Saf. Naruto chanted enthusiastically, his voice brimming with anticipation. What does it do? Summon lightning. Bring a storm? He asked, practically bouncing in place. Freren didn't answer directly. Keep practicing. Accurate pronunciation is crucial, she said. Walking away to retrieve something. Naruto continued, Saf, his mind racing with possibilities. When Freren returned, she carried an oil-stained steel bowl. Naruto blinked, confused. What's that for? Freren simply raised her hand. Saf, she said calmly, and with a flicker of magic, the grime and oil vanished. The bowl gleamed like it was freshly forged. Naruto froze, his excitement draining in an instant. What was that? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. It's an oil cleaning spell. Convenient, isn't it? Freren replied with a small smile. Convenient. Naruto exploded, his face a mix of disbelief and fury. I thought you were going to teach me something epic. My world might be in danger right now, and you're teaching me how to clean a bowl. Freren remained unbothered by his outburst. You underestimate the importance of practical spells. They're incredibly useful. Fern nodded in agreement. Mistress is right. A clean bowl can save time and effort. Naruto threw his hands up, utterly exasperated. What is wrong with you people? My world might be in ruins by now. Freren raised an eyebrow. Shut up. You know nothing about the scope of time. Oh yeah, and you do. I've seen civilizations rise and fall, Freren replied matter-of-factly. Trust me, I know. Naruto huffed, glaring at her. Fine, you don't want to teach me a proper spell. Whatever. I have another mage here. Oi, Fern, what spell can you teach me? Fern hesitated before answering. I can teach you a mold cleaning spell, Mr. Naruto. It's very convenient for cleaning copper statues. Naruto stared at her, his jaw dropping. What is wrong with you people? Kraft, seeing Naruto's anger, decided to intervene. Calm down, he said, gesturing to the fireplace. Come meditate with me. Grumbling, Naruto complied. He crossed his legs and closed his eyes, fidgeting and shifting uncomfortably. Minutes turned to an hour. Naruto's restless movements ceased, his body relaxing as if melting into the flow of the moment. Is he asleep? Stark asked, inspecting his axe. No, Kraft said with a grin. This is something else. Fern, now alert, murmured, his mana, it's increasing. What? Stark turned, watching in disbelief. He's connecting with the environment, Freren observed, her tone neutral but her eyes curious. Kraft's grin widened. I always thought he was just a general type. But no, this kid, he's a sage. A sage? Freren asked, skeptical. A person who will one day master the pinnacle of sorcery, mystic arts, and warriorism. He's inexperienced now, yes. But given time, Kraft's voice carried a certainty that left no room for doubt. He will surpass us all. The group fell silent, stunned by the proclamation. Even Freyren couldn't hide her shock, her calm facade betraying a flicker of disbelief. Stark shook his head. I get that he's talented, but isn't that a bit much? Kraft's response was firm. No, it's not just talent, it's destiny. Oh. Naruto opened his eyes. Kraft was right. Meditating does calm the mind. No wonder Pervy Sage did it quite often. And, wait, Naruto blinked as the stares continued. It felt like being a rare bird in a cage, surrounded by 4 overly curious zookeepers. He flailed his hands in frustration. Oi, what's with you guys? Did I grow horns or something? Freyren rubbed her chin, her gaze unwavering. He speaks. Naruto frowned. Of course, I can talk, you hag. What's wrong with you? Fern interjected, her tone clinical. Mr. Naruto, you've been absorbing mana from nature for 3 hours straight. Wait, what? His eyes widened. Stark, scratching his head, muttered, I thought you'd turn into some kind of animal or monster. I was ready. He sheepishly held up a rope. Naruto deadpanned. Seriously, I'm trying to meditate here, and you're over there planning to hogtie me like a rogue bear. Fern handed him a small mirror. Look, Naruto gasped. His jade eyes glowed like tiny lanterns, with 2 delicate black floral patterns framing them. Cool tattoos, he said, grinning like a kid who just discovered a shiny new toy. Kraft leaned forward, his voice calm. Do you feel different? Physically? Naruto tilted his head, considering. I kinda wanna pee. Freyren sighed. Try harder. Frowning, Naruto closed his eyes, concentrating. Okay, there's a bear sleeping a few miles from here. And, I can see a beaver over the hill. How? Ooh, Freyren leaned in with interest. Anything else? Naruto sniffed, his expression souring. Stark's bed is wet. Hey. Stark jumped up, looking defensive. Fern crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes at Stark. Mr. Stark. Yes, he replied, his face pale. You perv. Fern grabbed her staff and began chasing him around the room, her strikes landing with loud thwacks. As Stark yelped and scrambled away, Kraft chuckled softly, leaning back. Meanwhile, Naruto looked at his glowing eyes in the mirror again, marveling. Man, I can feel the mana flowing everywhere, like I'm part of the world. This is amazing. He looked up at Freyren. And I got tattoos. Beat that, hag. You call those tattoos? Freyren snorted, unimpressed. But as they all laughed and Stark tried dodging Fern's wrath, Naruto suddenly felt his connection to the world dim. The glow in his eyes flickered out, and the floral marks faded from his face. It's gone, he muttered. So, it has a time limit. Kraft nodded, his grin widening. A power like that can't be constant. It's a gift, a moment of connection with nature itself. He stood and clapped Naruto on the shoulder. We'll call it Sage Mode. Weeks turned into months. The cabin became more of a prison than a shelter for Naruto, who was growing increasingly restless. Snow piled higher and higher outside. The blizzard relentless, as if nature itself conspired to keep them trapped. Naruto, determined to make progress, had turned to Freyren with pleas to teach him magic. At first, his attempts were straightforward, polite requests, earnest promises to work hard. But Freyren, true to her enigmatic nature, would simply yawn and wave him off. Then he got creative. One evening, Naruto found Freyren sitting by the fireplace, her eyes half-lidded as she warmed her hands. He crept up behind her and began to massage her head, his fingers working through her silvery hair with surprising skill. Freyren hummed, leaning into his touch. Pretty nice, huh? Naruto grinned, his hands kneading her scalp. So, about that spell. Don't stop, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Naruto hesitated. Okay. But maybe after this, you could. Shish. Freyren leaned further back, eyes closed. Moments later, she was snoring softly. Naruto's eye twitched. You've gotta be kidding me. This became a pattern. Every time he massaged her head, hoping to extract some magical wisdom, Freyren would fall asleep before he could even finish his sentence. It was maddening. Fern wasn't much better. She had reluctantly agreed to teach him a spell, but her choice left Naruto flabbergasted. It's a vision-enhancing spell, Fern explained. Quite advanced for a beginner, but useful in certain situations. Naruto's excitement was palpable as he practiced the incantation, eager to see what new ability he had unlocked. When he finally succeeded, his jaw dropped. Wait a second, this lets me see through clothes. Naruto's voice cracked. Fern nodded, entirely unbothered. Yes, it's useful for identifying concealed weapons or hidden objects. Naruto buried his face in his hands. Oh man, Pervy Sage would have loved this. He would have killed for this. Fern raised an eyebrow. Who? Never mind. Naruto groaned. The spell was impressive in theory, but in practice, it only added to his frustration. He wasn't here to learn voyeuristic tricks or clean dishes with enchanted words, he needed real power. Spells that could save lives, turn the tide in battles, or maybe even help him survive the chaotic mess that was his world. The unyielding blizzard outside didn't help his mood. Instead of letting up, it seemed to intensify, the howling winds rattling the cabin and the snow piling so high that the windows were completely blocked. To blow off steam, Naruto frequently sparred with Stark. The seasoned warrior was reluctant at first, worried about accidentally hurting the mage apprentice. But Naruto's determination was hard to ignore. Their matches were intense, with Stark's raw strength clashing against Naruto's speed and unpredictability. "You're getting even faster," Stark admitted one day, wiping sweat from his brow after a particularly fierce session. "Damn right I am." Naruto grinned, despite the bruise forming on his cheek. Occasionally, Kraft would step in for a sparring match. Unlike Stark's brute force, Kraft's movements were calculated, almost graceful. Sparring with him felt more like a chess or shogi game, each strike and counterstrike laden with subtlety and intent. "Your reflexes are sharp," Kraft observed after one bout. "But you rely too much on instinct. Think ahead, Naruto. Plan your moves." Naruto nodded, though he couldn't help but grumble under his breath. Sparring was fun, sure. But it wasn't enough to keep him from going stir-crazy. "I'm so bored, you know," Naruto yelled one evening, throwing his arms up in exasperation. Fern, ever composed, glanced up from her book. "You could meditate." Again, Naruto groaned, flopping onto a chair. "I've meditated so much I'm starting to hear the trees snore." Frieren, sitting across from him with her usual detached expression, sipped her tea. "Then perhaps you're doing it wrong." Naruto's glare could have melted the snow outside if it had any magical properties. The days dragged on, each one blending into the next. Despite his frustrations, Naruto kept pushing himself, practicing his mana control and honing his combat skills. He couldn't shake the feeling that every moment spent idle was a moment wasted. Somewhere out there, his world might be falling apart, and here he was, stuck in a cabin, learning how to clean oil stains and see-through clothes. But no matter how much he grumbled, no matter how often he threw his arms in the air and declared he was done, he kept going. Because that's what Naruto did, he endured. And deep down, he knew that even the most mundane lessons could hold value. Even if it took every ounce of his patience to see it. Naruto had taken to meditating as part of his training, eventually discovering how to tap into sage mode. When activated, his reflexes became lightning fast. And his strength was superhuman, he could lift tons effortlessly. His heightened senses allowed him to perceive everything in his surroundings with unparalleled clarity. But one day, this newfound sensitivity landed him in trouble. He caught a strange, unfamiliar scent of blood coming from Fern. Being Naruto, he blurted it out without thinking. Fern's face turned red, and before he knew it, she was chasing him around the cabin, staff in hand, yelling, "Bad, Mr. Naruto." For a solid hour, she disciplined him, leaving him with a bruised ego and an important lesson: never meant on things he didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, his proficiency with the oil cleaning spell and the see-through spell had reached mastery. He could now clean anything or identify hidden objects with ease. At this point, Naruto realized things were getting out of hand. He wasn't here to become a magical cleaner or a voyeur, he needed to learn something substantial, and soon. Determined to move past these skills, Naruto decided to double down on his efforts, convinced that the path to greatness lay just ahead, if only Frieren and Fern would stop holding out on him. Naruto had been growing increasingly restless. The basics, oil cleaning and see-through spells, weren't enough to quench his thirst for progress. The monotonous routine, coupled with the raging blizzard that confined them indoors, left him teetering on the edge of boredom-induced insanity. After countless days of pestering, Frieren finally relented. "Fine," she said with a weary sigh, rubbing her temple. "I'll teach you the levitation spell." Naruto's face lit up like a child on his birthday. "Yes," he exclaimed, punching the air. "Finally, something cool." Frieren didn't respond to his outburst. With her usual calm, she raised a hand, muttered a string of unfamiliar words, and began to float. Her robe swayed gently as she hovered, her serene expression unchanging. It was as though she belonged there, effortlessly defying gravity. Naruto gawked, his mouth slightly agape. "Whoa, that's so awesome." Fern, who had been observing, stepped forward. Without a word, she repeated the incantation and lifted off the ground. Her movements graceful and precise. She hovered alongside Frieren, casting a smug glance at Naruto. "See," Frieren said, her tone flat. It's not that hard. Naruto was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. Alright, my turn. What's the chant? I'll get this on my first try, Datbeo. Frieren gave him a look that managed to combine exasperation and amusement. You'll need a staff first. Naruto froze mid-bounce. What? You need a magical focus, she explained. A staff. Without one, this spell is beyond your reach. Naruto's enthusiasm crumbled like a poorly made sandcastle. Okay, great. So, where do I get one? Fern crossed her arms, her tone practical. The closest magical item shop is several days away. And that's assuming the blizzard lets up. Naruto's shoulders slumped. You've gotta be kidding me. Stark chuckled from his corner of the cabin. Guess you'll have to wait, kid. But Naruto Uzumaki wasn't the type to wait around when there was a challenge to conquer. That night, long after the others had gone to bed, he sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, his brows furrowed in determination. His mind replayed the dreams he'd had of being a legendary mage like Flom. Wielding a golden staff with a gleaming amethyst stone. If he could see it in his dreams, surely he could make it real. Alright, let's do this, he muttered to himself, extending his hands. His fingers trembled slightly, but he ignored the doubt creeping into his mind. He closed his eyes and focused. From her spot near the dying embers of the fire, Frieren observed him for a while. She turned to Kraft, who sat nearby. Wake me up when he's done, she murmured before retreating to her bed. Kraft nodded but didn't take his eyes off Naruto. The boy's determination was admirable, Then if the odds were stacked against him. The hours dragged on, the storm outside battering the cabin with relentless fury. Naruto remained rooted to his spot, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in the air. His hands twitched as he muttered incoherent encouragement to himself. Come on, I've faced worse, this is nothing, he whispered. Kraft leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. Kid's got guts. I'll give him that. As the night deepened, faint wisps of golden light began to shimmer around Naruto's hands. They danced like fireflies, swirling and coalescing into an ethereal shape. It was faint at first, a mere whisper of a staff's silhouette, but it grew more defined with each passing moment. Kraft straightened, his gaze sharpening. Well, I'll be damned. Naruto's breathing grew heavier, his body trembling under the strain. The ghostly outline of the staff flickered, as if testing his resolve. Gritting his teeth, he pushed harder, pouring every ounce of his will into the summoning. I won't give up. He growled, his voice strained but resolute. The golden light brightened, and with a soft, almost anticlimactic thud, something solid materialized and landed on his head. Ow! Naruto yelped, his concentration shattering. He grabbed the object and held it in front of him, his exhaustion forgotten in the face of his disbelief. It was a staff, just like the one from his dreams. The handle was smooth and golden, and an amethyst stone gleamed at its tip, reflecting the faint glow of the embers. Naruto let out a shaky laugh, his lips curling into a triumphant grin. I did it. His voice was barely above a whisper as his body gave out, and he collapsed onto the floor, the staff clutched tightly in his arms like a treasured possession. Kraft chuckled softly and rose from his chair. You never fail to surprise me, kid, he muttered as he approached the sleeping boy. He carefully lifted Naruto and carried him to his bed, tucking the blanket around him. Naruto's grip on the staff didn't loosen even in sleep, a testament to how much it meant to him. Kraft glanced at Frieren, who was still peacefully asleep. For a moment, he considered waking her. But seeing the rare tranquility on her face, he decided against it. With a quiet sigh, Kraft returned to his chair by the fire. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the cabin, was a sense of warmth and accomplishment. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight peeked through the frosted windows of the cabin. Naruto stirred awake, groaning as he stretched out his sore limbs. The staff, still clutched in his hand, felt warm and solid, like an extension of himself. He smiled groggily at the sight of it, his achievement from the night before filling him with pride. When the others woke, Frieren's eyes fell on the staff in Naruto's hand. Her expression didn't betray much, but her mild surprise was evident in the slight widening of her eyes. Where did you get that? She asked, her voice calm yet tinged with curiosity. Naruto grinned, holding up the staff triumphantly. Summoned it. Spent all night on it, Datbeo. Frieren's gaze lingered on the staff, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. That's Flom's staff. Fern, who was rubbing sleep from her eyes, froze mid-yawn. Wait, what? She stared at the staff, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. That's not possible. How could he summon something like that? Stark, still groggy, scratched his head and leaned closer for a better look. Huh, didn't think you had it in you, kid. That thing looks legit. Naruto puffed out his chest, basking in the unexpected praise. Told ya I could do it. All it took was determination and guts. Freren's expression remained unreadable, though her mind raced. She did expect him to achieve something like this, and summoning Flam's staff was no small feat. Its golden handle and amethyst stone were unmistakable, relics of a bygone era and a mentor whose legacy she carried. Yet here it was, in the hands of a boy whose magic training was barely past the basics. Let me see that, Freren said, stepping closer. Naruto hesitated for a moment but handed it over. As her fingers closed around the staff, Freren felt a faint hum of magic, an undeniable signature of her mentor. She turned it over, inspecting every detail. It was no imitation. Fern crossed her arms, frowning. This doesn't make sense. How could someone with barely any magical knowledge summon that? Luck, Stark offered, though even he sounded skeptical. Naruto crossed his arms. Hey, give me some credit. I worked all night on that. I didn't even sleep, well, until I passed out. Freren handed the staff back to Naruto. You've done something impressive, but summoning the staff is one thing. Using it is another. Naruto's grin faltered slightly. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Freren said, her tone slightly dry, that having a staff won't magically make you better at casting spells. You still need to practice. Fern smirked. If anything, the spells might backfire. Better not blow yourself up. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Naruto muttered, rolling his eyes. But he wasn't deterred. He clutched the staff tightly, his determination rekindled. All right, so let's do this. Levitation spell, here I come. The group moved outside, braving the cold winds that still howled through the snow-covered landscape. Freren stood to the side, arms crossed, while Fern and Stark watched from a safe distance. Repeat after me, Freren instructed. She chanted the incantation, her voice steady and deliberate. Her body lifted off the ground effortlessly, floating a few feet in the air. Naruto nodded, gripping his staff with both hands. He repeated the incantation, his voice filled with confidence. The staff began to glow faintly, and for a moment, it seemed like he might actually succeed. Then, nothing happened. Naruto frowned, gripping the staff tighter. All right, maybe I just need to try harder. He repeated the incantation, his voice louder this time. The staff sparked, and a faint breeze stirred the snow around him. But again, he remained firmly on the ground. Stark snickered. Looks like the staff's defective. Fern shook her head, clearly unimpressed. More like the wielder's defective. Hey, Naruto shot back, glaring at her. This is harder than it looks, okay. Freren sighed. Your problem isn't effort, it's control. You're pouring too much energy into the spell without focusing it properly. Magic requires balance, not brute force. Naruto scratched his head, looking frustrated. Balance, huh? Yeah, okay, but how do I do that? Freren gestured to Fern. Watch her again. Pay attention to how she channels her magic. Fern smiled, always eager to show off to her junior. She gripped her own staff and chanted the incantation, rising smoothly into the air. She hovered there for a moment before landing gracefully. See, Fern said smugly. It's not about trying harder. It's about precision. Naruto groaned, his shoulders slumping. Great, now I have to figure out how to be precise. This just keeps getting better. Freren gave him a rare smile, albeit a small one. You've already done the impossible by summoning that staff. Don't let one failed attempt discourage you. Keep practicing. Naruto looked at the staff in his hands, its golden surface glinting faintly in the sunlight. He took a deep breath, determination hardening his gaze. All right, I'll get this. Just watch. I'll be floating around like a pro in no time. Fern rolled her eyes, Stark chuckled. And Freren watched with mild amusement as Naruto steeled himself for yet another attempt. The snow crunched beneath his feet as he planted himself firmly, ready to tackle the challenge head-on. For all his flaws, his relentless spirit was something even Freren had to admire. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Details in description.